the World Trade Center buildings here in New York. Something, we know not exactly what has happened at the Pentagon in Washington. There are unconfirmed reports that a plane crashed into the Pentagon and started a large fire there. There have been some people injured at the Pentagon. How many, we do not know. David Martin on the scene at the Pentagon says he saw several people injured. There are other, and I repeat, totally unconfirmed reports at Pentagon that it wasn't a plane that went into the Pentagon, it was a helicopter, and then there are yet third versions of this that say a plane and a helicopter may have crashed into the Pentagon. But all of that is in the area of unconfirmed fact. Something started a fire with some explosion at the Pentagon not long after the two World Trade Centers were hit by separate aircraft. Mika Brzezinski is downtown. Mika?
Yep. Hi, Mika Brzezinski here reporting from PS 89. It's near the scene of the now collapse of what we believe to be the Tower Number 1 of the World Trade Center. I was standing with CBS News correspondent Byron Pitts. We were coordinating our crews in a crowd of people near the corner of Murray Avenue and the West Side Highway when the collapse occurred, and literally plumes of smoke and gases as the collapse happened, I'm sure you're seeing in the video, began to roll our way, and that is when the crowd went wild. People just began to run. Our live trucks shut down, crews were running, reporters were running, people were running, and the cops literally were just waving their arms saying, go, go, go. We are inside the school right now, actually inside a small room, trying to stay clear of the crowds that are trying to get out of the way, and also the evacuation of this school. School officials here are trying to get everybody out of the building in an orderly fashion as quickly as possible. But again, there is so much confusion out on the street. It is literally chaos out there. We've got a short timeline here. The school right now is now putting on the intercom where kids need to go to assemble classes near Chambers Street. They're trying to organize the classes and get these kids out of here as safely as possible. Right now we're dealing with the air because of the plumes of smoke and gases. Byron pointed out to me we needed to move quickly because the smoke that was rolling our way and the debris as well was very thick, and it could be very dangerous. It was already a chaotic situation before the collapse happened, and this is just piling more danger and damage on top of what was already a very chaotic situation. We're dealing with a wide range of emotions out here on the street as well. You've got typical New Yorkers. I actually ran with my producer, Mike Noble, about a mile to get here before we hopped onto a golf cart and got someone to bring us right up to the scene. And what we saw were people who were walking nonchalantly. It's New York, kind of looking back at what they could see, and others completely upset, crying. One woman had to get off her bike because she was so upset. I think a lot of people in a situation like this, even if they're not close to it, all of a sudden feel that fear. They feel that maybe this was deliberate. What is happening in our city? But in a sense right now, we are dealing with a situation where two planes hit the World Trade Towers, one after the other. We're not necessarily sure how and why it happened. You've got some witnesses saying that they saw one of the planes, I believe the DC-3, or maybe it was the smaller plane. I think it was the smaller plane that appeared to be flying directly toward the tower, but no one can be sure right now. What we've got is hundreds of ambulances, hundreds of fire crews. I mean, I could not count the fire trucks and the crews that passed us as I was running to the scene, blaring their sirens, trying to get there as quickly as possible, trying to get to those injured and to the casualties. At this point, nobody knows how many casualties, but it appears there will be some. Back to you.
Mika Brzezinski reporting from the area of Manhattan where you see these smoke and flames. The two twin World Trade Centers hit this morning separately by aircraft. Now, let me underscore that New York is not burning. One section of New York has had a terrible thing happen, what President Bush has called an apparent terrorist attack. And in Washington, D.C., an apparent terrorist attack. I underscore the word apparent terrorist attack on the Pentagon. CBS News veteran Defense Department correspondent David Martin is on the telephone from the area. David, do you hear us?
The White House.
We're having some difficulty bringing in David Martin. These pictures from outside the Pentagon are of people who were injured in the explosion and fire. there. We're trying to bring in David Martin, who is on the grounds at the Pentagon. As you might well understand, cell phone traffic has been extremely busy this morning, so busy that it makes it difficult to get any cell phone communication in Manhattan, New York, and for that matter in Washington itself. So while we try to get David Martin up, you're looking at a live picture from the Pentagon in Washington. Keep in mind, 2 airplanes hit one each of the Twin Towers World Trade Centers in New York, and in the Pentagon, nobody knows what started it. Nobody knows for sure what started it. Apparently, a plane and or a helicopter was flown into the Pentagon, but that's not been confirmed. There was an explosion fire in the Pentagon. These pictures have to do with casualties injured at the Pentagon. If anybody has been killed, we are not yet aware of it. We go to Jim Stewart in our Washington Bureau. Jim?
And here in Washington, the police now have closed down the Capitol, the House and Senate. They have closed down the Justice Department. The World Bank has been emptied. We are told that the Metropolitan Police Department of Washington now is on full alert with the anticipation that there could be additional targets if, in fact, someone is targeting sites in the nation's capital. We are told that the FAA has grounded all flights, all domestic flights in the United States. One building that has not closed down is the FBI. The FBI has established an emergency command post in the center of its building. It's a contained area that is presumably safe from bombs, they believe, and FBI officials have been there now for the last 2 hours trying to sort out exactly what is going on. I can tell you, Dan, that the working theory here is that this is the work of terrorists. They specifically believe this is the work of Osama bin Laden. This is pure speculation at the moment. As recently as yesterday, Dan, when we were making our rounds on what the latest terrorist threats were in the United States and abroad, there was no hint whatsoever that there was a threat against any domestic target in the United States. There had not been any domestic intercepts of messages. There had been no sense that there were people here who should not be here. The feeling was that there were threats against targets overseas, but not here in the United States. They tell me, frankly, that there is a roadmap, a blueprint, if you will, for precisely what happened today, and that was signed by Ramzi Youssef. This is the bomber who was involved in the World Trade Center originally and who had plans to hijack aircraft and target buildings in the United States, specifically the CIA. Mr. Youssef, of course, was captured by the FBI. He's incarcerated here in the United States. But this is precisely the game plan that was talked out some 7 to 8 years ago by terrorists associated with Osama bin Laden. One note of concern here at the FBI already is that their field office, Dan, in New York is located at 26th and Federal. That is very, very close to the World Trade Center. Judging from the pictures here, my guess is that they have probably been incapacitated themselves and they'll have to move elsewhere in the short term. Dan?
Jim Stewart in our Washington Bureau. The top half of one World Trade Center building has collapsed and portions of the building have fallen onto the street below. Now, Mika Brzezinski is in that part of Manhattan where the World Trade Centers are located. We pick up her eyewitness reports now. Mika?
Go, Mika. Dan, with the collapse now that we witnessed here firsthand, you get a sense there of not only the chaos that is here on the streets of what happened with the 2 planes that hit the World Trade Towers, but also the depth of the disaster and the loss here of life. I'm sitting here huddled in a small room in PS 89 right near the scene where this school actually has been evacuated right now, and we're huddled by the phone trying to get information to you. And Byron Pitts and I were standing right in plain view of the collapse, and Byron counted 7 people jumping from the building. So you get a sense now of not just the disaster, the visual disaster that you're dealing with and the possibility of casualties, but you get a sense of a massive, at this point, loss of life. There was also mass chaos on the street when this happened. There were crowds of people being held back by police about 2 blocks from the scene, and what we had was just a rampage of people trying to get away, because after that collapse, you can see from the video the plumes, the billowing, the rolling smoke and gases and debris literally flying in the air after the reverberations of the collapse. People just started to run. There were those who were there just to look at it, just to watch what was happening. Some even, into it for the excitement value. And their emotions turned from excitement to complete fear and horror that they too might be hurt in this. And of course, there's the fears for the people who were inside the building, the people who Byron saw jump, but also who was underneath there, who might have been closer to the scene. Because I'm telling you, you hear me? Can you all hear me? We're being evacuated here from the building, and just tell you real quickly, when that collapse happened, if it had been on our side of the building, we would have been covered with that debris. That collapse spread far and wide, and the crowds that were nearby to look at this, I don't think were far enough from the scene. Now, I'm inside a school, which is 3-4 blocks from where this whole disaster happened, and they were methodically trying to get the kids out of here and get them out of here fast. They saw the rolling smoke and the debris coming toward the school, and it was not just a matter of being, a couple of yards away from it. It was get the kids out of here to a different place and quickly. Get your classes together and get them out of here and meet somewhere else. And they had the intercom system going wild here. Cops were running through the halls, and Byron and I were able to get into a small office here where we could get to a phone. But right now we are in an area that is completely evacuated, and we're talking to the NYPD right now about what to do and where to be at this point. I don't know if they're going to let us stay on this phone, but I will tell you, and I'm sure, Dan, as you've been reporting, 50,000 people work at the World Trade Center complex, and at this point there is a severe fear of loss of life at this point and massive casualties. You've got traffic at a complete standstill, and obviously flights in the area have been suspended. We've got a cop here on the scene. Were you actually here? Were you here when this happened, officer?
Yes, I just
Can you
that it was set on fire.
Tell me exactly where you were and what you saw. Can you do that? Okay, the cop right now is working on other things. Sorry about that. We're just trying to get a sense of what happened. I'm sure you've heard a lot of different accounts from different views of this. You've got 2 towers on fire, and now the one that has literally lost a part of the top of the building. And Byron and I were trying to figure out, was it the top quarter of the building, the top 8? It was a massive section of the building. So massive that people who were inside the building, still alive, were jumping. And at this point, what we are dealing with, I'm just looking out a closed door here at the chaos out in the hall here. People are still trying to figure out where to go. They're asking the cops how to get out of here, where's the safest place to go. And what we're trying to do right now is keep a handle on the chaos here, keep a handle on where people are, and we're going to stay on the story. Right now, Dan, I'll throw it back to you.
Mika Brzezinski covering at the scene of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. If you're asking how many people injured, how many people killed, the answer is we do not know. One portion of one of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center here in New York has collapsed. Now, American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767, flying from Boston to Los Angeles, is reported by the Associated Press to have reported a terrorist takeover in flight. We have not confirmed that on our own. This is according to the Associated Press. Assumptions can be made all over the place, but the fact is we don't know what airplanes hit the World Trade Centers. We do know that they were 2 separate airplanes not far apart. It's believed that an aircraft of some kind also caused the explosion fire at the Pentagon. Now, there are reports out of Washington at this hour. Keep in mind that the FAA has ordered what in effect is a lockdown on air flights over the United States. Planes in the air have been ordered to land. They don't want any aircraft flying anywhere in the United States if they can keep from it at this moment. And here's the reason. Reports of all kinds are flying around, but there is one report that another aircraft has been hijacked in the Eastern Corridor. U.S. Air Force fighter aircraft are flying over the White House at this hour. Evacuations of some portions, at least some portions of the White House and the Capitol have been reported over the last hour and a half. But this is a fluid situation, this breaking story situation. And to bring you up to date, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center have been hit each by 1 aircraft, one slightly before 9 o'clock, one just after 9 o'clock Eastern time this morning. And a short time after that, this picture you see on the right of your screen emerged from the Pentagon. What happened to the Pentagon, unclear, but there are eyewitness reports that an aircraft crashed into the Pentagon. Obviously, authorities are taking every precaution that they can, and amid this report, the unconfirmed report that another civilian airliner possibly has been hijacked somewhere in the Washington area is leading to yet another series of investigations. The Associated Press now, in a flash, quoting the Associated Press, one World Trade Center tower has collapsed. Period. And let's pause for a moment, because given the photographs, the live pictures we have, it's very difficult to confirm that report that a whole tower has collapsed. We're going to stick with the moment, for the moment, with the report that a portion of one of the World Trade Center towers has collapsed. Perhaps that's what the Associated Press means. With me here is Russ Mitchell in New York. Russ, seeing these pictures of the World Trade Center, both towers aflame, all that smoke down in that part of Manhattan, is reminiscent of what happened in the World Trade Center not quite 10 years ago.
That's right. It was February 26, 1993. 6 people were killed in a terrorist bombing, over 1,000 people injured. And for folks who are really not familiar with the World Trade Center, let's kind of put things in perspective for you. These are twin towers. They were dedicated back in 1973. They are each more than 1,300 feet tall, 110 stories. As Mika Brzezinski reported a few minutes ago, 50,000 people work in these twin towers, and we're talking about things from brokerage firms to law firms and other offices on those floors. To give you an idea of the amount of folks and the size we're talking about here, each tower of the World Trade Center has its own zip code. Each tower has its own zip code. It is a symbol of American capitalism. And when this happened, I know back in 1993, Dan, the thought was that the World Trade Center, along with other major buildings in the United States, in New York, were targets for this because they were symbols of America. And anyone who was out to prove something would hit these targets. And just like the World Trade Center, by the way, were the tallest buildings in the world before they were displaced by the Sears Tower in Chicago, which has also been evacuated this morning.
In that last attack on the World Trade Center, the terrorist attack for which the attackers were tracked down and convicted and imprisoned, at least some of them, the plan at that time by the terrorist planners was a series of attacks. They intended to attack not only the World Trade Center, but also the United Nations and at least one of the tunnels leading into New York City. Now, what's happened this morning on the prima facie case so far is that this was a coordinated series of attacks which succeeded with the World Trade Centers and with the Pentagon. Now, from the scene, you heard Mika Brzezinski earlier report that she saw people literally running out of their shoes, or I think it was Harold Dow, who reported that. Let me pause and say that a car bomb has exploded outside the State Department in Washington. So in Washington, something has hit the Pentagon. Witnesses say they believe an aircraft crashed into the Pentagon, a portion of the Pentagon, and there have been injuries there. Now a car bomb has exploded outside the State Department in Washington. No further details available on that. Most international air flights scheduled to come in the United States are being diverted to Canada. The FAA has asked that no aircraft be in the air anywhere in the United States if possible, what amounts to an air travel lockdown in the United States, as the country is obviously under a concerted attack of some kind. Certainly not the whole country, but selected targets, the World Trade Center, Twin Towers, the Pentagon, now a car bomb outside the State Department. It's what's being called a well-orchestrated orgy of terrorism. It's filled the skies here in Manhattan with black smoke and flames, and at least a portion of one of the World Trade Center buildings has collapsed. I repeat for emphasis that the Associated Press, very reliable, perhaps the world's most reliable wire service, says that, quote, a tower has collapsed. However, we don't confirm that, and what our eyes tell us is that a portion of one of the towers has collapsed, but perhaps not the tower itself. But at any rate, black smoke, flames, a lot of rumors, certainly some death and destruction, but how much is unclear. There have been injuries to the Pentagon, certainly injuries to the World Trade Center. It's difficult to believe that there are not some deaths connected with the World Trade Center, that some people were seen jumping from windows in the World Trade Center. We go now to Washington. CBS News correspondent Cheryl Atkinson. Cheryl?
What I saw regarding the Pentagon this morning around 9:45, headed on the George Washington Parkway, which, as you know, borders the Potomac River on the Virginia side, listening to CBS radio as to what was happening in New York. And I immediately thought about the Washington Monument and the White House, of course, which are always considered possible terrorist targets. And before me, in the direction of the Pentagon, came up a huge, huge white and black plume of smoke that within just a couple of minutes filled the entire sky in that direction. I tried to use the cell phone to call the office to report what I was seeing, but cell phone usage was apparently maxed out and it was impossible to get through. People were pulling off to the side of the road. Some of them appeared to be nervous to be crossing the bridges over into Washington, D.C., which is what a lot of that traffic along the Parkway is doing that time of morning. I didn't see a plane. It must have obviously, if there was one, been flying very, very low before it hit the Pentagon. Didn't hear the noise, even though really I was probably within about a mile of the building. And again, it was just an enormous amount of smoke over at the Pentagon in that direction, filling the sky within a matter of minutes.
Cheryl Atkinson in Washington. We now go to David Martin by telephone. David Martin, our Pentagon correspondent, is on the grounds of the Pentagon, is my understanding. David?
Dan, I've been standing about 50 yards away from the west side of the Pentagon, which is where this explosion occurred. Portions of that part of the building have now collapsed. There are perhaps a dozen fire trucks on the scene trying to fight the fire, and they are rigging the grounds around the Pentagon for handling mass casualties. I have only so far seen about perhaps 10 or 12 people who were injured, some of them seriously enough to require...
We're going to interrupt you, David Martin, and come back here to New York because the second tower in the World Trade Center is teetering and looks like it may be in the process of collapsing. The second World Trade Center tower just had another explosion, sort of, we can't call it a secondary explosion, and appears to be in the process of collapsing. We pause to let you absorb this picture. The Statue of Liberty, looking past Our Lady of Liberty to the World Trade Center itself. Watch this videotape of the World Trade Center tower. The World Trade Center tower in New York collapsing. A catastrophe on the tip of Manhattan. There are no words that can describe this. It's a time to watch, absorb, and think. As we re-rack that videotape to show you the scene again and give you the horrifying pictures from the tip of Manhattan. This is videotape from just a few moments ago. And what we had hoped and prayed would not happen, could not happen, has happened. New York's World Trade Center, in effect, has been destroyed. The loss of life will be high. There's an eyewitness who saw this happen. Sir, if you were there, please come in and identify yourself to us, please.
Again, you are watching live coverage of CBS News of this absolute terrorist disaster unfolding right now in Lower Manhattan. As you just witnessed now, both towers of the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center, have collapsed due to the airplanes hitting them. One at 8:45, tower number 1, and then tower number 2 struck at 9:03. Large aircraft. We are told that these were hijacked aircraft. Now, for those of you back here in the Seattle area, the FAA has issued a nationwide ground stop. That means that air traffic is not moving at any of our nation's airports. That includes SeaTac Airport. So flights that you may be expecting with friends and loved ones on board, it will not get here, and flights leaving as well. We just spoke with Bob Parker at SeaTac Airport, and he says that the FAA has issued that nationwide ground stop. That remains in place, and we can also tell you at this hour that both Pierce County and King County have activated their emergency response centers in this area. Obviously, every large city and region must prepare for anything like that, well, that could happen here with the unknown extent of this terrorism and this terrorist target. So we are on alert as well, as all cities should be across the country, and we are also activated as well to see how we may be able to help in situations that are unfolding right now in New York and again in Washington, D.C., with the Pentagon also struck at about 9:30 East Coast time.
I just wanted to add, Brad, that we have not gotten any idea of the magnitude of the loss of life in New York or at the Pentagon. Certainly we have seen pictures of the injuries at the Pentagon, but you can assume that there has been a massive number of casualties. Not just because we are assuming that the aircraft that plowed into the two towers of the World Trade Center were occupied. They were large aircrafts. One reported to be a 767 Flight 11, an American Airlines flight from Boston to LAX. But the other aircraft also thought to be a commercial airline. That combined with the fact that the building was occupied at 9 o'clock Eastern Time with those working in the financial district at the top of the World Trade Center towers, and both of them now having crumbled to the ground. Hundreds, if not thousands, of emergency vehicles have responded in New York City. They are trying to get as close as they can to the scene there to try to get the injured and those obviously most seriously injured to hospitals right away. And I want to just add that there are unconfirmed reports that there have possibly been other aircraft that have been hijacked on American soil. One report that one aircraft had been hijacked in the D.C. area in the last hour to hour and a half. That has not been confirmed, and of course, we do not want to be alarmist, but we can say as a matter of fact that the U.S. is under terrorist attacks. And if there are other aircraft out there that have been hijacked, what is it that the military can do with those
and that's
aircraft
what we're waiting.
if that is the case?
President Bush has already come on the air and said that this is an apparent terrorist attack. Obviously, it does look as though it is. You can see New York City now, at least Manhattan, completely engulfed in smoke at this hour as the World Trade Center, both towers, collapse within the last half hour or so. We are awaiting word from President Bush. He is en route back to Washington, D.C. The White House, the Capitol, the Justice Department have all been evacuated in light that the Pentagon was struck shortly after the Twin Towers were struck as well. We are waiting to hear word from President Bush on any U.S. action that might take place. We have seen video earlier of F-18s that were scrambled, F-18s and I believe F-16s into the air over the White House and some other government buildings in Washington, D.C. We're going to continue to monitor this, and as Joyce said earlier, go between CBS and CNN coverage so we can bring you the most up-to-date information as this devastation that is unfolding in front of us that you can't even put into words continues to unfold on our nation's East Coast.
Let's go back to live coverage, but we want to remind you if you have flights expected in from SeaTac or if you are flying out today, cancel those plans. The airport is closed. Do not go that way. You'll have to reschedule because the nation is in a complete lockdown in terms of air travel across the country, including SeaTac Airport. Let's go back to CBS now.
To catch their breath. The air is a little fresher here than it is outside. Give it back to my colleague, Mika, for a moment.
And Dan, it's Mika Brzezinski here. I don't know if you can still hear me. The air is getting really difficult to breathe. Okay, Dan, I'm gonna send it back to you. I'm just taking a look outside though, and the cars are all covered with debris. We are definitely still in the line of fire.
Mika Brzezinski and Byron Pitts on the lower end of Manhattan. This live photograph, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center have collapsed. Planes smashed into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon this morning in what is widely reported to be a well-orchestrated orgy of terrorism. It's filled the skies of lower Manhattan and much of the whole island of Manhattan and Washington, D.C. with black smoke. The streets of both cities have had some chaos. The number of injured and dead is unknown. At the moment, the core, the heart of the story is the collapse of the World Trade Centers. How many people have been injured and killed? Unknown. But we have to face the fact, because it is a fact, that an attack on the World Trade Centers has been devastatingly effective, collapsing both of the Twin Towers. This will go down as a kind of Pearl Harbor of terrorism in Manhattan, New York today. To say nothing of Washington, where the Pentagon has had explosion and flames. Witnesses said that aircraft of some kind went into the Pentagon. That has not been confirmed. A car bomb exploded outside the outside the State Department in Washington. Government shutdown in Washington, D.C. All employees have been advised to go home. I want to double check whether that's Washington, D.C. and or New York. Washington and New York. All non-essential New York City employees have been asked to return home. Secretary of State Colin Powell is returning to the United States from a trip from Peru. President Bush was in Florida this morning visiting some school children. He's on his way back to Washington, D.C. All New York City airports are closed. All entry into the city by tunnel and bridge have been closed. We're not absolutely certain of the George Washington Bridge, but I believe all bridges and tunnels, at least for a while this morning, into the city of New York were closed. And this is the reason. This picture you're looking at here, those of you familiar with New York, this is the great harbor of New York City with the Statue of Liberty just down in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, roughly. There you can see the Statue of Liberty off to the left. This is smoke on the water of the Hudson River, New York City Harbor, and we will show you on videotape again the collapse of the second of the World Trade Center buildings. One had collapsed earlier, and then there was this collapse. "110 stories down to the ground. There's been a fourth explosion at the World Trade Center. Just reported. Claire McIntyre is an eyewitness to this collapse of the World Trade Center. Ms. McIntyre?
Yes. Hi.
What did you see?
Well,
what did you feel? What did you hear?
I'm on the 91st floor of Building 1, and I faced the north side, and I was at my computer, and I heard the plane, and then I saw it hit right above us, the 92nd or 93rd floor probably, or even 94. And our whole floor just fell to pieces practically, and we got out, though. Everybody in my company got out. And we walked down the stairs, and when we got down to the bottom, it was like a war area. It was just, there were bodies on the ground in pieces, I'm sorry to say. And when we came out, we were walking up the block to get away from the building, and that's when 2 World Trade Center blew up, and we were just in a cloud of darkness, and we had to feel our way to some clearness, and we've been pretty much walking ever since, trying to get north.
Ms. McIntyre, if you can stay with us for just one moment, I want to interrupt and say, Dateline Pittsburgh, large plane crashes are reported in western Pennsylvania. The source of this are officials at Somerset County Airport. No further details are available. We've had these large plane crashes reported now in western Pennsylvania, car bomb going on outside the State Department in Washington. No further details on that. Fire and explosions at the Pentagon. Eyewitnesses say an aircraft of some kind possibly went into the Pentagon, and then here in New York, the collapse of these 2 World Trade Center buildings. Ms. McIntyre, eyewitness to what's been happening down there. You said you saw one of the planes as it came into the building.
I did. I actually saw it after it was already partially into the building. I saw the wings and the tail.
Was it a large aircraft?
It looked fairly large. I didn't think it looked as large as I'm hearing it probably was. I thought it was a small jet.
We just want to inform you that we are just getting reports from the Associated Press of the crash of another plane north of the airport in Pittsburgh. That is all we know at this point. that the Associated Press is reporting from Somerset County Airport. People there in Pittsburgh are reporting the crash of another large plane north of the airport near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Just to update you as well on the airport situation, we are again told FAA says that SeaTac Airport will be closed for at least the next 7 hours. This is all part of a nationwide ground stop. We have also been told that Canadian airspace is closed as well. We have been told that our King County and Pierce County leaders are being briefed on the situation right now, and we are expecting to hear from Governor Gary Locke very shortly as well on this disaster that continues to unfold, a very deadly and devastating disaster that's unfolding on our East Coast. We are still waiting for President Bush again to address the nation again on what appears to be the largest terrorist attack to ever hit U.S. soil.
We want to go now to our coverage from CNN to bring you the very latest information, now getting word on what's going on at the Pentagon, where earlier today there were reports of a plane or a helicopter, we don't know yet exactly what, but something that crashed into the Pentagon about an hour after the World Trade Center.
Washington, D.C. Are being evacuated. As we speak to you now, there are a variety of reports, and it's important to try and put this in some kind of order, but the most important things to tell you if you're just joined in is that what has all the makings of an extraordinarily well-planned terrorist attack on both Washington and New York has taken place this morning. The trade centers here in New York, the 2 World Trade Center towers have collapsed after being hit by a plane. Maria Hinojosa joins us on the phone. She is in New York, down near the building. Maria, what can you tell us?
Well, I'm actually at St. Vincent's Hospital right now, where at about 40 to 45 minutes after the first explosion, they started seeing patients here. What I'm hearing, and I have not been in the ER yet, is that they have at least 100 patients or more, that several of those people were dealing with issues of smoke inhalation, many of them throwing up, that there were several people who went directly to the operating room who are in very critical condition. Outside the hospital, people are coming in trying to help, to donate blood. Essentially, everybody here at this hospital is in a state of shock. I mean, I walked into the testing area, and the women here who usually just draw blood are also extraordinarily moved and shocked. They're moving in and out of the emergency room to try to help as many people as possible. Now, outside a block, about a block away from here, where you really had a bird's eye view of the 2 twin towers, which are the landmarks of New York City, the people stopped, the entire traffic has stopped. People have poured out of buildings and were watching, in fact, as one of the towers collapsed. And then you're really seeing a lot of people trying to move north, away from any place downtown near the World Trade Center area. People are just walking. The subways are stopped entirely all around the area of the World Trade Center. You can't get below 14th Street. And there just feels to be like a massive exodus of people walking north to get away from the area as far away as they possibly can.
Maria, I know Kitty Pilgrim is with you as well.
That's right, I'm right
Kitty,
here.
tell us what you've been able to report on.
I'm actually reporting from Kennedy Airport at the United Terminal, and I was here this morning flying out. When they made an announcement about 20 of 10 that all flights were grounded, people thought it was just a normal course of airport business these days, and so there was not much of a reaction, and then the news started to trickle through. It was not an official announcement made over the intercom.
Kitty, let me interrupt for just a second. The Associated Press is reporting that federal officials fear that a second hijacked plane or another hijacked plane is headed towards the Pentagon, and I'm looking for the time on this. We will continue to check that out. Kitty, I apologize for interrupting. Why don't you continue? Did we lose her?
Everyone didn't react, but then the news came through. I have never seen Kennedy in this condition. I've been here many times. People are in absolute shock. No one's talking. They were just staring at each other with their arms dropped to their sides. A pin could drop in the United Terminal. There were a couple hundred people there, and no one was saying anything. After about 20 minutes, people rushed to the phones. You cannot phone out. There's no real access back to the city. People are trying to get back. They've unloaded the baggage from the planes. They've asked that everyone pick up their bag and take it out of the terminal and take it home. And they're asking everyone to please leave. People are just finding it difficult to leave. They are not officially evacuating
Kennedy Airport at this point, at least at the United Terminal. The attendants have been asked to stay. And again, there's still several hundred people standing around not knowing what to do. No one's even speaking.
Thank you. Not familiar with New York. Kennedy is the major airport handling international flights into the city. It is also an enormous complex of 7 or 8 or 9 terminals.
That's exactly right. And in fact, the baggage has been unloaded into a separate terminal from where I am, and they're asking people to walk over, pick up their bags, and take them out. It's virtually impossible to get from place to place at Kennedy, and of course, bridges and tunnels into Manhattan are inaccessible at this point. No one has anywhere to go.
Kitty, thank you. And we'll get back to you. Chris Plant at the Pentagon has more. He joins us on the phone. Chris, what can you tell us?
Hi, this is Chris Plant at the Pentagon. Can you hear me?
Yes. Chris, we hear you. Go ahead.
All right. The area to the west of the Pentagon has been evacuated further back by law enforcement and military officials as they anticipate a second aircraft arriving at the Pentagon. It's been deemed to be threatening enough where I saw at least one F-16 fighter jet in the air over the Pentagon headed to the west where the plane was reportedly coming in from. Again, they're saying here that a second aircraft is expected to arrive at the Pentagon sometime soon. They take it seriously enough that they have scrambled at least one fighter jet that I saw, probably either from the D.C. Air National Guard or the Maryland Air National Guard, both of which fly F-16s. The west front of the building of the Pentagon along Route 27 has now partially collapsed. About a 60-foot section of the building laterally has collapsed the entire 5 stories. The building is obviously, the fire is traveling inward in the building toward the courtyard, and this wedge, as they call it, of the Pentagon, the westernmost wedge, which was just refurbished and was in fact reinforced for a terrorist attack and for just this sort of thing. I know that there were a significant number of injuries. I'm unaware of any numbers on fatalities at this point. People here who came from the building are suggesting that surely there were fatalities, but no one could confirm any. I have spoken to a number of people that I know who pulled people out of rubble. There were severe injuries. There are a number of helicopters here evacuating injured people, and I'm told by one senior military source that the plane in the side of the building has been tentatively identified as a Boeing 767, a full-sized airliner, Boeing 767. But that at this point they're waiting for the arrival of a possible second plane, which has been deemed to be a threat, and as I said, fighter jets have been scrambled to address that matter.
Chris, stay with us. That's extraordinary bit of information coming out of Washington now. Let me add to something that we said earlier. We have a report now that a large plane crashed this morning north of the Somerset County Airport, which is in western Pennsylvania, not too terribly far from Pittsburgh, about 80 miles or so. Boeing 767 jet, don't know whose airline it was, whose airplane it was, and we don't have any details beyond that which I have just given you. We don't know if this is somehow connected to what has gone on in New York and Washington, but we do know that another plane has crashed, this one about 80 miles south of Pittsburgh, or at least to the southeast of Pittsburgh. Rose Arce, one of our producers here in New York, joins us on the phone. Rose, what do you have that's new?
Yes, just a while ago, I think you saw that collapse of the top of the World Trade Center. Well, it looks like a large chunk of that debris has hit a building very close by, about 2 blocks away next to an elementary school, causing another explosion. So for the last few minutes, I've been watching people running from that direction. There was one man, I'm not child, but you saw on the street. I've seen several emergency service workers carrying other emergency service workers from the scene. There's a haze everywhere. It's very, very difficult to see, but there has been the whole area has been covered by soot and ash. So it looks almost like snow. So as people are coming up the street running from the scene of this new explosion, you can see them slipping on the ash and literally having to drag each other up the street. There's an incredible amount of panic down here in downtown Manhattan as people are realizing that they really need to leave the area entirely after spending the last hour or so just watching this from afar.
Rose, stay with us. Terrific work. Let me throw another couple of pieces of information out as we continue to put this all together into a straight line if we can. The United Nations has been evacuated. The United Nations building on the east side of Manhattan has been evacuated. The city is in, this is election day, a primary election for mayor and city council races here in New York. That election has been postponed until further notice. Obviously, we are in the middle of an extraordinary catastrophe that started about 8:45 Eastern Time here in New York when one plane crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. About a half an hour after that, as people were converging, as fire and police and rescue teams were converging on the scene, a second plane appeared to the west of the Trade Center buildings and slammed into the second tower. That's what you just saw. Fire shooting out the north and east side of the tower. Shortly after that, we began to get reports of events taking place in Washington. An explosion which first came to us as a fire at the Pentagon. Now there's a report of a second hijacked plane heading towards the Pentagon. It is believed that one of the planes, perhaps both, but one of them, we have been told, was an American Airlines 767 that hit one of the Trade Center towers. About a half an hour after that, perhaps a little bit longer, lose track of time a little bit in these situations, the first tower, or let me correct that, the south tower, the second tower, the one to the left, collapsed. It collapsed in a cascade of smoke and spark, and what we cannot tell you is if there was a second explosion that caused that collapse or if it was simply. That's the first one. That's the
These are the first live pictures we're getting now from inside the World Trade Center now, about 2 hours after the first airplane hit Tower number 2 of the World Trade Center. Of course, as emergency crews are desperately trying to get in and get certain people out of the building.
This is tape, actually, that we're looking at, live pictures, but the first videotape that we've gotten from there. Now, we understand that one of the major problems for emergency crews there on the ground is the smoke. They are having major breathing problems trying to get into the scene there because of that cascade of debris that came tumbling down with both of the collapses of the 2 towers of the World Trade Center. So even emergency crews, and hundreds if not thousands of them in there trying to help those desperately in need of assistance, are having trouble themselves.
Just so much damage and destruction there. We want to quickly take a shot of SeaTac Airport we can show you at this hour. SeaTac Airport, guys, we can take that picture. Well, I guess we're going to stay. There we go. SeaTac Airport, as you can see, pretty much empty again. Bob Parker telling us the SeaTac Airport, don't come to the airport. We're in a nationwide shutdown right now of airports. Everything's fine at the airport right now, but they don't expect to have it open until about 1 o'clock this afternoon, possibly later. We just wanted to let you know that.
In fact, all roads to the airport are closed, so you can't get there anyway. Also, our state emergency management agencies have been activated, and there are reports that Seattle police are posted at the Space Needle and at the federal buildings here in Washington.
We also know that the military bases here in Washington state have been notified, and we are expecting them to be on some type of alert status here as this information continues to stream in from around the country. If you did miss it, we do know that another plane has crash landed and burned in Pittsburgh. It was a 747. So as of right now, we know that 2 planes crashed into the World Trade Center first thing this morning, then reports that a helicopter crashed into the Pentagon, and now a plane that has crashed north of the city of Pittsburgh, a 747. That's 4 aircraft right now that have crashed this morning.
And also they are on heightened alert in Washington, D.C. for the obvious because of the Capitol building and all of the state agencies there that have been evacuated. But there are reports that another plane is in the air, possibly hijacked aircraft headed for the Pentagon, a second aircraft. There are reports unconfirmed at this point, and so we are waiting for word from Washington to find out the latest status on that. And military aircraft are in the air, patrolling Washington, D.C. this hour.
We are expecting President Bush to get back to Washington, D.C. at any time now. He did address the nation from Florida, where he was visiting a school there. We are told as soon as he gets back to Washington, D.C., we can expect some type of words from the President and possibly Vice President Dick Cheney as well. We will stand guard here throughout the morning here in the KIRO-7 studios to update you as to local information that you may need regarding your friends and loved ones as this devastating devastating tragedy continues to unfold on the East Coast. In the meantime, we will be flipping back and forth between our colleagues at CBS Network and at CNN to bring you the most up-to-date information.
We just want to say that you're looking at New York City, the largest financial city in the world, the target today of a major terrorist attack on the United States. It is the center of a great loss of life this morning and a major national crisis. We will bring you the very latest information as we get it. Let's go back to the network.
Officials quoted by the Associated Press. We had passed along earlier that this Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles was reported to have been one of the planes that might have crashed into the World Trade Center. American Airlines now has confirmed that it was. The airline said the flight was hijacked after takeoff. The number of passengers on the plane could not be immediately determined. Los Angeles International Airport is under tight security. Police are not allowing people to unload baggage to board flights at the American Airlines terminal. As one officer at the Los Angeles terminal put it, all we know is what we've heard from radio and television. We're not allowing any unattended vehicles near the terminals. The New York stock market is closed for the day. The New York City primary election has been called off. All New York City airports are closed. The FBI Joint Terrorist Task Force is on the scene here in New York. An absolutely horrific scene here in New York where the World Trade Centers, both of them, have collapsed. And we go to Jim Stewart in Washington, where the Pentagon has also been hit by an attack. Jim?
Dan, we've just received word from the FBI that a United Airlines flight has apparently crashed at Camp David, the home of, or the retreat of the president. We have no word on casualties. The FBI tells us only that they have a report from the FAA that they are trying to confirm that a United Airlines flight has crashed in the vicinity of or at Camp David. Dan, the situation in Washington right now, frankly, as you can imagine, is a bit confused, but I can tell you that they are giving a great deal of thought right now to what they're calling continuity of government. They are frankly trying to decide where to take the president once he lands at Andrews Air Force Base, and they're trying to decide what to do with Congress, that they need to be possibly evacuated from the city. They have coordinated so far with the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Organization, which handles major disasters, and they are anticipating that FEMA will take overall command of this as if it were a weapons of mass destruction attack on the United States, a scenario that they have played out many times here before. Now, I want to stress that thus far, they don't have a clear plan. But the notion here is that the heads of state, the heads of government, the primary officials of the United States should be removed, apparently, from Washington, D.C. to a safe location. And the first priority, obviously, is the president. Only moments ago, when I was speaking with the FBI, the thought there was that he would possibly go to Camp David. If this report is true from the FAA by way of the FBI, that would now appear not to be a plausible alternative. Where to take Congress, since the House and Senate now have been evacuated, is also a question for them to decide. Quite frankly, they acknowledge they're having a great deal of problems because of the shutdown on our own commercial aviation system. They're having problems getting people into location to respond to these incidents that we've been watching all morning in New York and now apparently in other parts of the country as well. So they're going to be turning to the military for some alternative aviation resources. And quite frankly, they're encountering a problem, they say, with a collapse of the infrastructure and the telephone company. Everybody is trying to call home and see how their loved ones are doing. And quite frankly, that's overloaded the circuits, and it's affected the government's ability to do business as well. I wish I had more detail for you, Dan, but as you know, these events are unfolding as we speak, and that's all we have at this point from Washington. Dan.
Jim, about this report that a United Airlines plane has crashed into Camp David, Maryland, the presidential retreat just outside of Washington. Repeat the source on that for our listeners and viewers, please.
The source of this information is an FBI official in Washington who says that he has been informed by the FAA. Has not confirmed it himself, but has been informed by the FAA that a United Airlines flight, he says it's United Airlines Flight 93, has crashed into the vicinity of or at Camp David. Dan, I will tell you one other thing, too, that the FBI and terrorist experts here have immediately noted, and that is today, September the 11th, is the anniversary of the Camp David Accords. Signed at that historic location after weeks of negotiations between the Arabs and the Israelis, and of course has been a thorn in the side of both parties now for some years, and a source of great consternation. You can't help but notice, according to the FBI, the coincidence of the date, and now, if this is true, the coincidence of the target. Dan.
Jim Stewart in Washington. At the World Trade Centers, the Twin Towers in New York, both of which have now collapsed. Many lives are believed to have been lost, but many lives are also believed to have been saved. It will be hours, perhaps many hours, before we have anywhere approaching a clear picture on the loss of life and the number of people injured in the collapse of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. At the Pentagon in Washington, we know there have been injuries. There have been no reports of fatalities as yet in what is believed to have been an aircraft of some kind. David Martin, who's on the scene, said he saw the twisted remains of what appeared to be the fuselage.
We are bringing you the very latest information as we get it, and we want to tell you how this could affect all of you. As you know, SeaTac Airport is closed along with all of the airports across the nation, and we have a reporter there on the scene.
Yeah, Brad Good along with Joyce Taylor here in the studio, and we want to go now to Sabrina Kang. She is live at SeaTac. Again, now we're into about an hour or so of this nationwide shutdown. Sabrina, what else are you learning there at SeaTac?
Well, Brad, take a look first of all. This is such a rare sight. The drives are empty here at SeaTac Airport. For security measures, the airport has shut down the drives, and all planes are directed by the FAA to stay on the ground here at SeaTac Airport. This is kind of a rare sight because usually when we're here doing live reports, there's maybe one or two planes taxied here at the gates, but as you can see, quite a few planes, really a lot of them now parking into the hangar, and a lot of SeaTac officials telling me this morning that really a chaotic situation. They had never dealt with a national ground situation. We were the first media team here on the scene, and I've got to say it really was a subdued mood here at the airport. A lot of people just finding out what happened in Washington, D.C. and New York, and employees, passengers, and many of the people at the terminal telling me that it was really an emotional time, and they were thankful at least that they weren't up in the air when all of this chaos erupted. Some important information to tell you. You are not allowed to drive up to SeaTac Airport to pick up passengers. They are saying if you do need to go to SeaTac Airport, you have to go into the parking garage and walk across and go to the terminal directly. Now, this is not a lockdown situation. Airport officials are allowing passengers to come in to the airport, but really once you get here, you're kind of stuck because a lot of people are not letting you out of the grounds. So that's the situation from SeaTac Airport. We'll bring you the very latest as things develop. Back to you.
Sabrina, just a second there. Bob Parker initially said that the airport would be shut down until noon or 1 o'clock, but with the situation still so volatile across the country, has he updated that at all, or are they still saying about noon and 1 they expect to have it open?
Well, we did talk to Bob Parker maybe about 30, 40 minutes ago, and he says obviously because things are changing rapidly, it's hard to put any kind of time frame on this. He told me, at least at last check, that it could be 2, 3 o'clock before any of these planes are off the ground.
All right, Sabrina Kang standing by live there at SeaTac Airport with the very latest. So again, we're hearing now SeaTac Airport closed until 2 or 3 this afternoon, again, as we are in a nationwide shutdown, and also Canadian airspace, which of course is very close to us here in Western Washington, has also been closed, and the military bases throughout the area are on alert.
We're just getting new information now. We want to pass on to you that the FAA is now confirming that, and their word was several aircraft are unaccounted for and believed to have been hijacked across the country. This coming from the FAA, now confirming and being reported on other networks and news sources that several aircraft, commercial aircraft, this hour remain unaccounted for. Also, we have told you of a couple of other plane incidents. The most recent one, the plane that has crashed near or on Camp David, that happening within the last 15 to 20 minutes. And out of Pittsburgh, a large plane crashed. Reportedly, local officials are saying that a plane has crashed, a Boeing 767, about 8 miles east of Jennerstown in Pennsylvania. That has not been confirmed by the FAA. That is being reported by local officials there. That would bring the total to the 2 planes from the World Trade Center, 1 at the Pentagon, 1 at Camp David, that's 4, this one near Jennerstown, Pennsylvania.
That would be 5 aircraft altogether.
So far, and several others unaccounted for this
We also
morning.
want to mention locally, too, that we were just speaking with Seattle Mayor Paul Schell over the telephone. He's meeting with Governor Gary Locke right now, but he did tell us before he had to leave that the Columbia Tower, the Bank of America building downtown, which, of course, is the largest skyscraper here in downtown Seattle, was evacuated about a half an hour ago. As people were coming to work, they were told, no, we're going to keep this building closed for now. If any other buildings are evacuated or closed down, we'll get you that information. But if you work in the Columbia Tower, you don't need to go there. That building is closed and evacuated as of right now.
I want to bring in Rick Price, who's our aviation expert, because, Rick, a lot of people are wondering if there are so many aircraft out there unaccounted for, and we know that 5 apparently have already gone down, which is massive loss of life just for those in the aircraft alone. What is it that the military can do with hijacked aircraft carrying people, citizens across the country, to keep them from further attacks?
Now, this is something you have to get very cautious when you get into, because there's going to be a lot of major decision-making going on here. But the fact is that if there is an airliner, even loaded with people, inbound to something that appears to be a target, I think the Air Force or whoever the military authority is in that area who's there at that time is going to have to make a hard decision on whether or not to shoot that airplane down to prevent further loss of life. This may be a decision that we're looking at in the future. I don't want to panic anybody, but it's out there on their radar screens. You can bet they're talking about it at the Pentagon and wherever else they're running this show. One other thing I'd like to point out is that at any given moment on a normal day, there are thousands of airplanes in American airspace, most of them airliners just making their way back and forth. There are a lot of general aviation airplanes as well, but a lot of airliners that are of the class that we're talking about here. They do have a way, and in the midst of this, I'm not going to get specific, but they do have a way to let people know. And I think we're going to a CBS special report here, so I'll stop and we'll come back to this.
All right, let's go back to CBS, and we'll get back to you momentarily with news on how this will affect you here at home. But again, SeaTac Airport is closed. Let's go back to CBS.
The target. Now, we are given some information now by federal law enforcement authorities about the sequence of the hijackings today that have led to these incidents. We are told, and Dan, I have to stress this is sketchy information, but we are told that there were 4 hijackings. The detail that we've been given thus far on those hijackings is American Flight 11, which is described as a 757 from Boston to the West Coast, United Flight 175 out of Dulles International Airport outside of Washington, D.C., American Flight 77 from Dulles to Los Angeles, and United Flight 93, which apparently was from Newark en route to San Francisco. Now, the only firm information that the FBI has shared so far is that the United Flight 93, is apparently the aircraft that went down in the vicinity of Camp David. It is believed, they say, that it is American Flight 11, and I believe this has been reported already by CBS. American Flight 11, the 757 aircraft from Boston, was one of the 2 aircraft involved in the World Trade Center. It is not clear where the other 2 aircraft crashed, but it is confirmed, the FBI says, citing the FAA, I should add, that these are the 4 aircraft that have been involved in the hijackings, were involved in the crashes today. One other significant piece of information, Dan, is apparently there is and has been some communication from the aircraft after they were hijacked. We are led to believe that the FAA has recordings of some message, some communication from the aircraft before they crashed and into these targets. There is still no word, Dan, on what the continuity of government, and I hate to use such an official phrase here, but it's the only one that's been thrown at me so far by federal authorities, but what the continuity of government is going to be, and there's a great deal of talk, a great deal of concern here about that, because, as you can imagine, people are quite at loose ends here in the nation's capital, and they want to ensure that the continuity of government stays in place. Therefore, they're trying to decide where does the president go once he lands coming back from his trip, I believe in Texas. He will land at Andrews Air Force Base, we believe. The plan had been that he would go to Camp David. That appears not to be the case any longer, but we don't have any confirmation of that. And then there's the question of what do the cabinet officers do, and what does the House and Senate do? The White House has been evacuated and is still considered by law enforcement a potential terrorist target. The president cannot go there. The same is true for Capitol Hill. The House and Senate cannot go there. The Justice Department has been evacuated except for some key personnel. The only major federal building that I can find, Dan, in the city of Washington right now that is up and running and apparently handling this situation is the Federal Bureau of Investigations, what they call their SIOC room, their Strategic Information and Command Center. Normally, there would be a war room and a situation room, I should say, at the Pentagon. But the Pentagon has never been attacked before in the history of this country and is not in a position, apparently, to coordinate events there now. So much of what's happening in terms of a response to these events is being coordinated out of the FBI. That's all we have at the moment from here, Dan.
And quite a bit, Jim Stewart, and thank you for that. Jim?
Welcome back to our continuing coverage here of this major terrorist attack across the East Coast right now. Of course, this has ramifications and impacts all of us around the nation. We are checking with our local leaders as to how they're handling this emergency response. We're going to go live now to Kyle Moore. He's standing by at the Space Needle on whether or not the Needle is open or closed. Kyle, what can you tell us?
Brad, we have just heard that the Needle is closed. We have Dean here. He is the president of the Space Needle. He is speaking to us right now, telling us that the Needle will remain closed today. They have a contingency plan in effect. The Needle has been evacuated, has been since 7:30 this morning. Let's listen in for a second what Dean has to say.
As you watch the news images today and you see the things that are going on around the country.
Well, it's just, I wouldn't have anticipated this in my lifetime. I'm sure I'm right along with everybody else. It's like Pearl Harbor. It's like my parents must have felt.
Dean, we're live right now. Explain to people why you're closed down today.
Well, it's primarily a concern for our guests and our staff, and it's a safety first issue with us, and so that's why we've taken this stance.
And you plan to remain closed the rest of the day?
For the rest of the day.
Indefinitely.
For the rest of the day, we'll make a call as it relates to tomorrow and the next day as information becomes available to all of us.
Any special security in place?
Yes, we are obviously, we've locked the place down, we've swept the building top to bottom, looking for unusual packages and done the standard things that one would do in this sort of scenario.
From where did this directive come?
Thanks. That again is Dean, the president here of the Space Needle, telling us that it will remain shut down today, has remained evacuated since 7:30 this morning. Now, earlier today, we were following some crews around the Seattle Center. They are inspecting all of the major attractions here, including the Experience Music Project, to make sure there are no unusual packages or anything like that. At this point, we do not know if any other attractions will remain shut down today. At this point, it seems that it will be business as usual, except for the Space Needle. That's the very latest here, reporting live at the Space Needle. Kyle Moore, KIRO-7 Eyewitness News.
Kyle, just stay with us for a second. I want to tell folks that they are also in the process of evacuating the Bank of America Tower, also known as the Columbia Tower in downtown Seattle, because of the events unfolding on the East Coast today. There have been no threats here locally. There have been no threats against the Space Needle. We want to be clear about that, or SeaTac Airport, or the Bank of America building downtown. But people inside that building are scared. They report that they're scared and that they wanted to get out. And so as a result, they have evacuated that building as well.
We can also say that there is increased security at the King County Courthouse in downtown Seattle. To talk more with us about security in the area in King County, let's bring in King County Executive Ron Sims. He's joining us on the phone. Ron, are you there?
I am here.
Ron, obviously a very disturbing day for all of us here as we watch this unfold on the East Coast, and I know that you folks have got to mobilize to decide how you can keep the people of King County safe. What's at the top of the list?
Oh, we've already mobilized. We have not, though, received any information from any federal agency as to any terrorist activity out here. Not the FBI, not the State Department, not the Pentagon. We have a meeting right now with the Joint Terrorism Strike Force, and they're meeting and they will advise, but they haven't heard anything. But I can tell you what we have done so far. We're participating with the Port of Seattle in the closure of the Port of Seattle SeaTac Airport. We also have the Boeing Field, and we have restricted access to Boeing Field, including anybody getting on large aircraft. Aircraft are being allowed to land en route to SeaTac. As a result, some buildings will be closed down until all those flights are down. We have checked our bus tunnel. We have secured our telecommunications facilities, our 911 facilities. We have been in this courthouse, and we've gone where I am now, and we've gone from top to bottom in the courthouse. We will also be emphasizing today checking people as they come in, but we at this time have no reason to believe that people should not come to work. We have done the same thing with our regional justice facility where our jail is, but we've deployed. We just tell people that right now every governmental unit, the bridges are being checked by the Washington State Patrol. We just had a meeting with the governor's office. We are very calm. We have made as many calls as can be made to get information regarding any activity out here. We don't believe we haven't gotten any notice at all, so we believe that there hasn't been here any activity, so that people can assume that their families are safe here in King County, that they can go to work.
Ron, that's certainly good news. You know, when we look around our area, though, SeaTac is just one area that many people would worry about. You know, you could sit there and say, well, what about places like the Tacoma Narrows Bridge or the West Seattle Bridge or one of the floating bridges and things like that? Have those major transportation routes been discussed at this hour?
Yes, they have been, and we have, along with the Washington State Patrol and the State Department of Transportation, looked at those bridges, looked at the access. We don't want anything to happen on those bridges or the Narrows Bridge or the I-5 North and South Bridge or the University Bridge or the Aurora Bridge. So those have all been, they're being checked or have been checked already. Our bus tunnel, our bus, we have moved into a very second stage alert status. We can tell people that we believe that people can go at this time. We don't have any reason to believe that people cannot go to work, to school.
Okay, and just a point of fact right now, in an emergency situation like this, are you in contact with any of our local military here that you might be working in conjunction with them?
We have a joint task force for events like this. We call it the Joint Terrorist Task Force, and the answer is yes to military, Secret Service, FBI, other agencies are involved in that. They do meet and they do coordinate. We work with them directly. There is, at this time, we have no reason to believe that anyone out here is in danger of anything. We believe that we have fully examined. We're working off information. We are calling for information. We are dealing with people out of Washington, D.C. who have called out of here to tell us what our instructions are. People can go to work and go to school and go shopping safely.
Ron, this is Joyce Taylor here with Brad Good. A lot of people do have at the top of their minds, though, the fact that the Space Needle was an apparent target during that whole 4th of July situation where we shut down the Space Needle and festivities because, I should say, New Year's Eve festivities and the Space Needle. So we know that in the minds of some terrorists, the Seattle area is a target, and we have so many military bases here. So are you saying that we have no reason to be worried, or are you saying we should be cautious?
What we know at this time from all the information that we've received through our terrorism strike forces, which we'll do directly with Washington, D.C., our conference call with the governor just a few minutes ago, which involved the mayor as well, we don't believe that there's any threat in this area at this time that people can go to work and to school safely. There's no reason for anybody to alter their behavior. What we do is we move into a second stage alert, which simply means that we want to make sure sure that people can get to work safely and can get to school and can go shopping. This has been obviously, if you're just watching TV and you realize what's happened here, it's been an extraordinary, awful, ugly act of terrorism. But we have moved in to make sure that the people here can get to work, can get to school, can do things safely. We are confident at this time that from the information that we've been able to gather, from the searches that have already been undertaken, from the reviews, from the things that our people have already done in fire and in police and through our Emergency Operations Center, that there is no reason for people to be worried.
Ron, just last question here, and we'll let you go. I know you've got a busy agenda here today. What are you being told about planes that are already in the air, say, over Western Washington, or aircraft that may be headed this way? Because we have heard from the FAA that there are at least several planes that are unaccounted for, and of course, not knowing where those planes could go, that would obviously be some cause for alarm here.
There is no reason to be alarmed by any aircraft that will be landing here. There is absolutely no reason to be alarmed.
All right.
The FAA has been, there are no planes being allowed to take off. Any planes being allowed to be, they have ascertained the safety of the individuals in those planes and the pilots who are piloting those planes. There's no reason at all for anyone to be worried at all in any way about any aircraft. You will not see many of them. Any that are landing, and I think they've all probably landed by now, have either been put down at SeaTac or other airports on the way here. But any plane simply was low on fuel and needed to land. We don't keep planes flying up there, but the FAA has restricted airspace. There will be no commercial activity. People shouldn't worry about any planes to see. Those have been, if you do see a plane, and you won't see many, it is because that plane has been allowed to land by the FAA. All international flights have been diverted, but there's no reason for anybody to look up there and say, what is that plane going to do? If there's a plane in the air over Seattle or King County, that plane is going to land. It has not been taken over by anybody.
Before we let you go, I'm just curious. County executives across the nation, along with mayors and governors, all public officials are scrambling now, trying to maintain a sense of calm. And I'm curious what your personal thoughts are as you have watched this tragedy unfold in New York and now at Camp David and at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C.
It was horror. I just could not. I just sat there. I could not believe it. I woke up and flipped on the TV, and we were moving at that point. We've been trained to do that whenever you see acts of terrorism like that, to move into your alert status, which we did. And so we've been working all morning. It's just horror. But we're also telling people that because of this, like when we had the earthquake, we know what to do. We have gone out there. We have moved through this process. We have done everything that I think can be humanly done. And as a result, the reason why I'm at work and the reason why my own kid has gone to school this morning and my wife's gone to work this morning is because I'm very, very confident that you can go to work safely. And you'll go home tonight safely and your children will be fine. We think we've eliminated any risks.
We have other people standing by that we also need to get to. We are very grateful for your time. I know that you'll be back with us when you have any new information. Thank you so much, King County Executive Ron Sims.
We want to bring in Ed Kerrigan now. He is an eyewitness from New Jersey that saw everything unfold this morning there in Lower Manhattan. He is actually with some Seattle business residents this morning. Ed, can you hear me on the phone?
Yes, I can. How are you, sir?
Well, we're as best as can be expected on a disastrous day like this. Can you tell me what you saw there from across the water and what's happening in the city right now?
Yes, when the first plane hit the building, of course, we heard it on the radio. We're about 10 miles away from the building. Unfortunately, we have a very good view, or had a very good view of the World Trade Center. We went to the window after the first plane crashed. We were looking at it. Someone had even asked, where's the building? We said, well, where the smoke's coming out of, and pointed and said where that plane is heading towards. I don't know what the heck it's doing. And then we just saw it. At the time, we thought the first one was just a total accident. We didn't realize it was a terrorist attack. And we saw the second plane plane go into the building, and obviously a little fire explosion. And I said, oh my God, it must have hit a flame, and it must have just gone out. At the time, we didn't realize that it went in right away. Everyone that was watching it on all our floors, I mean, everybody gasped. A couple people collapsed, of course, because unfortunately, with that many people, 50, 80,000 people working over there, unfortunately, almost everyone knows of someone or has a family member that sometimes works in a building. So even though we're 10 miles away, the whole area, I'd say right now, is just in chaos, because you just don't know, who got out of their building or who hasn't now that both towers have collapsed.
Well, Ed, I think what's of concern now as we look at live pictures is you can't even see major portions of Manhattan. Isn't it completely shrouded in smoke?
Oh, the smoke has engulfed again. Since we're 10 miles away, we can't tell what the area is, but it's several mile radius where there is just thick smoke. We could, again, when the towers collapsed, the smoke was only coming out of the top of the building, it seemed. So we did see myself saw the second tower absolutely collapse. Several people saw the first tower, and it's a very, very scary thing. As you know, even out in Seattle, it's just the magnitude is just hitting people. And again, people are collapsing just thinking about who they know or family members that work in the building, unfortunately.
And what's most amazing to those of us here on the West Coast is that we have not seen very much videotape coming out of the downtown area of them pulling even survivors out. The information there on the street close to those towers is very, very limited. Do you have a sense of what's going on down below?
It was hard when they were saying on the news here, and they do have pictures of both towers collapsing. I'm sure you'll get that soon.
Yeah, we've been watching this live along with the rest of the country.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, but you could see from cameras that several people did jump from the building after the two planes crashed and before the towers came down. We were even wondering as we were talking here that was it the smoke or why people were jumping or what was going on. But we're just hoping that if you know the area, there's just so many buildings, smaller buildings that are in the direct area right there. We're just hoping that at least those people were able to evacuate in the hour before the towers collapsed.
Well, and Ed, as you know now, with the airports closed, with the streets clogged, with the bridges and the tunnels closed, getting in and out of Manhattan is virtually impossible.
Yes.
Barely probably enough room for emergency vehicles to get into the scene and tend to the many, many victims that have to be in and around that area.
Most definitely. It's all the Hudson crossings, getting in New York were closed before the towers went down. Now, as you well know, there'll be no flights. So pretty much anyone that's in the area is going to stay there, and anyone that's over here in Newark is going to be looking for hotels. And the people that you spoke about, the Seattle business people that are in our building are doing that themselves. Getting hotels, and unfortunately, it looks like hopefully they have the situation in hand in terms of anything else happening, but it's still chaos in the immediate 20-mile area, I'd say.
Ed, let me just ask you, since you're there with some Seattle business people right now, was there anything special that you know of planned at the World Trade Center for today? Was there any type of event or large international meeting or anything like that that was to take place in those buildings this morning?
Not that we know of, but obviously you probably even know more so. It's about 110 floors, so there's always there's always government functions and other things going on, but we haven't heard of anything specific.
Okay.
Ed, we certainly appreciate your time, taking time out when there's so much chaos unfolding there where you are. And we appreciate your vantage point and your eyewitness account of what happened. It's shocking to all of us this morning, and we wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to go back to some live pictures now from our area here around Western Washington as more and more people are trying to gather information about what is happening on the East Coast with the now many plane crashes. The Pentagon, the two plane crashes there at the World Trade Center towers, as well as Camp David, and as well as Camp David and the Pentagon. We're looking at some live pictures now of I-5, where you can see here at 45th Street, they are notifying people on the signs, even north of Seattle, that SeaTac Airport is closed and that you should not really even attempt to get anywhere near SeaTac Airport at this hour. Again, Bob Parker from SeaTac telling us they expect that airport to remain closed down until at least 2 or 3 this afternoon.
If by chance you are just joining us, it is, after all, only 8:30 in the morning on this Tuesday. We want to tell you very briefly the shocking situation unfolding this morning. About 8:45 Eastern Time, an American Airlines flight, Flight 11 out of Boston going to LAX, crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center in New York. About 15 minutes later, a second aircraft, a large one, believed to be a 767, crashed into the second tower right there of the World Trade Center during our live broadcast, in fact. Then, a short time after that, there was another type of aircraft. We don't know if it was an airplane or a helicopter that crashed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C.
And then after that, of course, then we heard word again of an airplane crash in Pittsburgh. And then at Camp David, just all spaced out about a half hour after one another. And then shortly after that, the towers there of the World Trade Center collapsing down into the city there of Lower Manhattan. Just an absolute massive tragedy, such devastation that you can't even really put into words right now. If we can bring in Rick Price real quickly here, our aviation specialist who's worked with the FAA for years, has worked with Boeing aircraft for years. If you've got a few points to add.
We just want to hold on, Rick, because we have Mayor Paul Schell from Seattle here with us on the phone. I know you've had a very busy morning, and thank you for joining us. I know you just came out of a meeting with the governor. What can you tell us about what we're doing here in Seattle and across Washington in light of these events?
Well, shortly before 7 o'clock, we activated our emergency operations center, and I was here with the chief. We now have a full complement of people here. We've quickly moved to secure the base of the Space Needle as well as the Columbia Center building. We worked with the port, offered assistance at the airport, and have extended hours of all police and fire and public safety personnel. We're monitoring the circumstance very carefully. We're taking no risks, zero risks. Although we know of no threat against the city or any of our symbols, but we're taking all necessary precautions. I suspect by the end of the day we'll be sending assistance to New York if they ask for that.
Certainly. Mayor, and I know, you were obviously very instrumental in closing the Space Needle and canceling the Millennium celebrations there because of the terrorist attacks. This happening in New York, of course, it must have you a bit on edge, not knowing what could happen, and the fact that we know that there are several aircraft still in the air, according to the FAA, that are unaccounted for.
That's right, and we're monitoring that circumstance very carefully until they're all on the land. And obviously this was a coordinated terrorist attack. It's been a possibility for some time, and that's why I think it's always wise to take every prudent precaution to ensure the public safety here, which is what we're doing in Seattle.
Mayor Schell, do you have any idea? Are there any military aircraft up in the skies over Washington monitoring for that?
I do not know that. I wouldn't be surprised right now that that all the skies are being monitored very carefully by the U.S. military, and we have to rely on our Air Force at this stage. At this stage, I think we're going to be fine here in Seattle, but we're not taking any chances either.
Well, Mayor, we do know King County Executive Ron Sims, who I'm sure you've been meeting with as well today, told us after discussing this with the governor that your Joint Terrorism Task Force has already met this morning, as you said, and so that everyone has been briefed and apprised of the situation and what we need to do here. So we can only hope that will not be necessary.
We were in again very quickly in conversation with both the governor and the county executive, and we're working together quite nicely.
All right.
Can you tell us, Mayor Schell, specifically what buildings, bridges, roadways, etc., are being watched?
I don't want to go into too much detail, but we had people around the West End in a hurry because there's a lot of infrastructure there, and all from Harborview Public Hospitals, all places of potential targets and or essential services, and we moved quickly on all of those.
All right.
Mayor Schell, thank you for taking some time. I'm sure we'll be talking with you throughout the day.
Thank you.
We want to bring in John Nance, who is an aviation expert to many of us here, nationally renowned. He has watched these events unfold, and when we speak specifically about the type of aircraft, Mr. Nance, what comes to mind as you watch this? Oh, I'm sorry, we do have him on tape. He's not on the phone. He addresses what he saw happen today.
I always heard my folks talk about what it was like on the day Pearl Harbor occurred. We had a coherent enemy. We knew who that enemy was. We're at war and we don't know who the enemy is. That's the problem. But the enemy is not our own people. That's one thing we've got to understand. That's my biggest worry right this moment. This says a lot to us about our vulnerability as a free people in a free society. One of the things that, of course, is going to come out of this, we've had 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 airliners hijacked. We've lost maybe 1,000 passengers, innocent passengers. What do we do to tighten this security down? Well, we can fly like El Al. El Al's a fine airline. They've managed to keep away from any terrorist activity for years. but we'd have 10% of the air traffic flying in the United States if we tried to tighten it down that way. This is one of the dangers of being a free society. It's one of the dangers of having a free and open access aviation system. Can we do better? Obviously, we're going to be taking this one apart down to the molecules. But how in the world this happened, of course, is going to be one of the major sidebar stories in terms of the aviation aspect, because that's what triggered it. Without the ability to fly a 250,000 or 400,000 pound airplane, I don't know how heavy those airplanes were, into those buildings and structurally collapse them over time with the fire, that couldn't have occurred. We had hardened up, we as, the society, the World Trade Center from the ground. They hit us from the only place they could, and that was the air. I'll tell you one thing, that unless there was a turncoat pilot among the crew, which I would have trouble believing, they had their own pilots. This is one of the most incredibly well-coordinated attacks in history. And, this is not time for finger pointing either, because another agency, another area of our society that's going to take an awful lot of hits on there is the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the FBI, everybody who's normally charged with trying to ferret these things out. But it's finding a needle in a haystack. And obviously, we can say from the very beginning, this was an incredibly well-coordinated attack. A little sidebar is that for all these years that we've had these ridiculous questions asked.
Welcome back. You were listening to John Nance, an aviation expert, very familiar with those of you here in the Seattle area. We want to let you know that the ferry system now is taking passengers only, foot passengers. No cars are boarding any ferries at this hour. I don't know how long that's going to last, but as soon as we get new information on that, we will let you know.
Just another precaution among many here that will be taking place here throughout Western Washington. SeaTac Airport closed as well till at least this afternoon. We will continue to monitor this situation both nationally and locally. We're going to go back to the network now for an update as to what's happening on the East Coast.
Call Americans' response number at 1-800-245-0999. 1-800-245-0999 for information on these two American airline planes that have been involved in tragedy this morning. Russ Mitchell has late word on what's happening in and around Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and in Pennsylvania.
That's right, Dan. Earlier this morning, we told you about a plane crash near Pittsburgh, just north of the Somerset County Airport. Another plane that was hijacked today was United Flight 93, which was traveling from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. United Airlines has just confirmed that flight is the one that crashed outside of Pittsburgh this morning. As of this moment, we don't know how many folks were on board, don't have any idea of casualties or fatalities. We'll get that for you in just a bit. But again, United Airlines has confirmed that yet another plane that was hijacked this morning has crashed, this one just outside of Pittsburgh near the Somerset County Airport.
And some of the monuments and principal buildings in Philadelphia, we were told earlier, had been shut down as a security measure.
That is right. Those shut down about 2 hours ago, and they are expected to be closed the remainder of the day.
We go to John Roberts in Washington. John?
Well, Dan, the Secret Service, as you can imagine, has activated its emergency plan. It's a plan that has been activated in stages prior to today's numerous events. One time that it was activated was when that small plane crashed on the south lawn of the White House. At about 9:40 this morning, the Vice President was evacuated from his office at the White House. Destination unknown. This is being kept very tightly under wraps at this point. The President, who was in Sarasota, Florida this morning for an educational event, also en route to destination unknown. But CBS happens to be traveling in the tight pool with the President today. We have one of our camera crews and one of our producers aboard Air Force One, and I'm certain that just as soon as the administration allows them to disclose whatever location they may be traveling to, we, as the other networks will hear from them in a prompt fashion. What we know at this point, Dan, is that the White House has been evacuated, as has the old executive office building, and a cordon of about 2 blocks has been set up around that building. There was obviously an imminent threat after this other explosion at the Pentagon earlier this morning. As to whether or not the White House itself was specifically targeted, no one will say. And again, the location of the President at present and where he is headed, and the Vice President and where he may be, being kept very tightly under wraps. But we do understand, Dan, from talking with sources close to security that provides protection for the President, that they are not likely to be headed to Weather Mountain. That is that highly secretive facility in the Blue Ridge Mountains in the western part of Virginia, which is essentially a hollowed-out piece of granite, which there are contingency plans to take officers of the administration, the president, the vice president, his staff and the cabinet, and the leadership of Congress to in the event of an all-out attack on the United States. We understand that they will not activate Weather Mountain. That's a direction that it appears that they're not headed in at this point. The president could go to any military base across the country. There are also a number of other facilities in which there are secure communications that the president could operate from. One of those being Camp David. Now, there had been earlier reports of some sort of a crash or an explosion near Camp David. Sources close to protection for the president told me this morning, Dan, just a little while ago, that they have not had any reports of that, though, as you can imagine, because of the extent of the carnage and the attacks against America this morning. It's difficult to know exactly what is going on at any particular point in time. Certainly, we will be hearing from the president later on when communications are reestablished. But for the moment now, Dan, what they're trying to do is make sure that the administration is in place to respond to this crisis, to ensure that the reins of government do not get broken, to ensure that they have communication with the leadership in Congress as well as the military. Those plans are in place right now. The president en route to a location where he can be assured of secure communications in contact with all of the officers that he needs to be in touch with. And again, Dan, we should be hearing from our people just as soon as they take the wraps off of this exactly where they are and what the immediate plan is. Dan?
John Robertson, Washington, of course, is concerned about how the government operates in Washington, but make no mistake, the center of this story today, these terrorist attacks, is at the tip of Manhattan, where the World Trade Centers, both of the Twin Towers, 110 stories up, both have collapsed. No one is making light of what's happened in Washington. Something happened at the Pentagon. An aircraft crashed at or right into the Pentagon. Unclear exactly where. Unclear whether anybody was killed. Some people were hurt at the Pentagon. An early report from a government official that a car bomb exploded outside the State Department was later denied by the Federal Securities Operation. That the FBI, an FBI official told Jim Stewart that a plane crashed near Camp David, the presidential retreat in Maryland. But now there's some question as to what all that was about. As one would expect in the early hours, there is confusion about the facts. But a known fact is that there's been a terrible loss of life. How much, no one knows. The mayor of New York says a tremendous loss of life. A New York City police official didn't want to be quoted, said that he thought that the loss of life in the World Trade Center collapse. You're looking at a live picture of it now with this Empire State Building in the foreground and the smoke over the Hudson and the great New York harbor. Smoke in the nostrils of the Statue of Liberty, literally, that the loss of life here may be, according to police official, in the many thousands, unquote, but that is not known. Now, authorities are on the alert from coast to coast, halting all air traffic, evacuating high-profile buildings, and tightening security at strategic facilities following these attacks on the World Trade Center in New York and the Pentagon. 4 airplanes are now confirmed to have been hijacked this morning. Whether it was one of those hijacked planes that hit the Pentagon, this is a live picture of the Pentagon, the first attack in the history of the United States Defense Department since it moved into this huge, sprawling Pentagon building in Washington. As you can see, there's considerable smoke, which may or may not indicate considerable damage at the Pentagon. Now, evacuations have been ordered at the United Nations building here in New York. This happened shortly after the 2 planes hit the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, and an aircraft of some sort crashed right into the Pentagon, or if not right into it, very near it. The Sears Tower in Chicago has been evacuated. The tallest skyscrapers in Boston, Cleveland, Minneapolis have been evacuated. Seattle's landmark Space Needle was closed. In Massachusetts and Maine, most state employees were sent home and state buildings were shut down. Military bases across the country are been placed on alert. Extra security went into place at the Department of Energy's Nuclear Weapons and Research Complex in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico, and at Fort Detrick in Frederick, Maryland, home to the Army's main germ warfare defense laboratory. All of this happening as we face the fact, a brutal fact, that there has been a catastrophically effective attack on the World Trade Centers and additional attacks on the Pentagon in Washington, and possibly, reportedly, and we believe true, an effort to attack Camp David in Maryland. I'm pausing for just a second as we get some new information in. However, that's not been totally confirmed, so I'll put it aside for the moment. 4 commercial airlines hijacked and crashed. 2 of those were American Airlines planes. Now, these are the flights that have been confirmed as hijacked flights this morning. American Airlines Flight 77, Dulles to Los Angeles. American Flight 11, Boston to Los Angeles. This, American says, is one of the planes that crashed into one of the World Trade Center buildings. United Flight 175, Dulles to Los Angeles was hijacked. United Flight 93, Newark to San Francisco was hijacked. Those are the flights. If you have questions about this and you need to contact one of the airlines if you're concerned about passengers on these flights. This now back to live picture. Police say casualties could number in the thousands. Let us take you back now. We're going to show you on videotape the key sequence of events. This, again, is not a graphic. This is an actual photograph of the plane crashing into one of the World Trade Center towers. Flames shoot out of the opposite side of the building. And then, a short while later, one of the towers began collapsing. The prayer was it was only part of the building collapsing, but it turned out to be the whole building comes down, raining debris in a wide area below it. And this harsh fact we had only had time to absorb it when the second tower began to collapse. First one plane hit a World Trade Center tower, then another plane hit the other tower. One tower collapses and the other collapses. Carol Marine, our CBS News correspondent based in Chicago, is just back from this part of New York City. Carol?
Dan, I think I was in the second collapse or an explosion right after that, because I was trying to make my way around Stuyvesant High School. I believe that's correct. I'm not a New Yorker. But I was coming toward the World Trade Center looking for CBS crews and asked a firefighter if he saw any. He told me to walk down the middle of the road. All of a sudden, there was a roll, an explosion, and we could see coming at us a ball of flame stories high. He and others screamed, "Run," and I ran. I fell. One of them picked me up. We ran as fast as we could, and then he threw me into the wall of a building and covered me. Forgive me. I am in his debt. You know, Dan, I know firefighters do incredible work all of the time, but this was exceeded anything that I can imagine. He threw me into a wall, covered me with his body. I could feel his heart banging against my back. We were both so sure we were going to die. The flame somehow stopped short of us. But whatever collapsed created, and you saw it in some of that video, Dan, a rain of cinders so thick that you couldn't see this far in front of you and you couldn't breathe. A police officer, and I wish I knew the firefighter's name, a police officer by the name of Brendan Duke grabbed my hand, and he and I tried to find our way through it until we could hit a clearing in the light. What you're seeing on the ground here, Dan, was in the air, and you couldn't see. And again, we thought we were finished. We somehow got to the light. Another firefighter gave me his mask for a moment so I could breathe. And then I made my way somehow through the smoke into the light to our crews. There was a cameraman there whose head was bloody, and he was trying to shoot and set up some of these shots there. The firefighters, the police, the crews, the people. People streamed toward me as I made my way to the Trade Center, sobbing and crying and trying to call home on dead cell phones, but they couldn't get through. There is so much fear out there even now because of gas main leaks. There was a point at which I watched firefighters run. Someone threw me forward. A paramedic truck let me jump inside and drove me halfway. And then a New York City bus driver opened his doors of an empty bus and drove me here to the broadcast center. To all of them, I mean, citizens of New York and have remained amazingly calm but deeply frightened.
CBS News correspondent Carol Marine, still covered with the smoke and pieces of the debris. Stick with us here, Carol. I want to repeat that New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani now says, and this is a direct quote, there have been a tremendous number of lives lost. Certainly no one at this early hour can know how many lives have been lost. But it's impossible to watch the pictures of both of the World Trade Centers collapsing. Keep in mind, these buildings were 110 stories in height each.
Been listening to live coverage. I'm Joyce Taylor here with Brad Good, bringing you continuing coverage both nationally, internationally, and here at home as to the events unfolding across the country with the bombing of the World Trade Center, not bombing, I should say, the plane crashes, the terrorist attack against the World Trade Center this morning, the Pentagon, and then 2 other planes unaccounted for still out there.
Let's talk with Susan Harris now. She's with our Washington State Ferry System. And Susan, we did receive word from your department about a short time ago that you will no longer be carrying cars on the ferries this morning. Is that the latest?
That is the latest, beginning at 9 o'clock of the next subsequent sailing. We will not be carrying vehicles across the water on Washington State ferries except to Vashon Island or to the San Juan Islands, of course, who would be cut off without our service. We will be carrying walk-on passengers and bicyclists, however, until further notice. This is at the recommendation of the United States Coast Guard and the concurrence, of course, of Washington State ferries.
How long do you expect that to last, Susan?
It's hard to say at this point in time. As long as there seems to be a heightened awareness and a concern, then obviously we are not going to carry vehicles because it's harder for us to search vehicles. And with the car bombings going on across the country, it is for the safety of our customers that we are obviously doing this.
All right, Susan Harris, the Washington State Ferry System, thank you for your time, and I know you'll keep us informed as to what's going on with the ferry service for those of our viewers who travel by ferry. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, as we come to grips with this disaster, as we understand, 50,000 people working at the Trade Center, countless number of other people that have been affected both at the Pentagon and there in downtown Manhattan. We want to pass along, if you feel the need and you would like to attend, a noon prayer service will be held in downtown Seattle today at noon at the St. James Cathedral at 9th and Marion. That's up there on Capitol Hill. And so we've been informed by the church that they will be holding a noon prayer service. Again, that's at St. James Cathedral.
We've been talking about the limited information that we're getting from news crews on the ground.
We don't know, but right now, Mike, if you can go back to the Pentagon slowly, we can show you a great deal of fire again coming out of the Pentagon on the west side, right in front of where the helipad would be. This is about as far away as you can get from where the crash impact was. This fire has spread through the building, the bowels of this building, and now has erupted here. So this is a big problem for Arlington firefighters who've been assisted by D.C. and military.
Another ambulance, Silver Spring Critical Care. Harry, what was the reaction of your co-workers at the point of impact?
Calm, excitable, and but in a calm way, and just, my God, and we went out the building, and the emergency exit lights came on, strobe lights and everything. So we were out of the building and gone in a very little short time.
As Pentagon employees, what have you heard over the years about the possibility of terrorist attacks?
We've speculated myself. I've been here 11 years, and I've speculated myself that we're in the airway here to National, and it would be very easy to hit the Pentagon.
We're going to keep you updated on what's happening at the Pentagon. Obviously, the flames coming out, but we want to go back to Jennifer Ryan at the Virginia Hospital Center. She has the latest on the injured taken there. Jennifer?
Hi, Andrea. We're just hearing ambulance sirens in the distance. I think you might see one coming up in just a moment, but let me show you first right behind me. These are the trauma folks. Here's a man walking up, you can see now, in a white shirt. There's blood on his shirt. He's holding his wrist. Don't know, of course, the nature of any injuries. He's obviously been able to walk. We have seen people walk up. We've seen them being driven up, some of them by ambulance, some of them by personal car. But again, you are watching live television now at Arlington Hospital, where so many of the Pentagon victims are coming here in any way they possibly can. The commute is difficult. Let me also tell you what these folks are dealing with. Not only 28 victims, this is now the 29th. We have 29 as far as our count goes, but they are having an extreme shortage here around the Washington area for blood. We are also told they need IVs, tubes, tubing. They need oxygen tanks. They need all kinds of equipment that is running out quickly. I just spoke to an ambulance crew who came in, grabbed as many supplies as they could, as they were allowed. They put them back into their ambulance and then headed out once again. But as you can see, these teams are all here waiting, standing by. There has been the question about whether or not biological weapons could have been used in today's attack on the Pentagon. I was told by the public service person here that there is no indication. And just a few seconds later, I had a doctor come up to me and he said, there's no indication thus far. He wanting to clarify. In the last few minutes, we have also seen many of these folks, they were in plain clothes. Many of them might have been media folks or nursing supervisors or what have you. They were given masks. They were also given their blue robes. Here's more supplies. This is a Fairfax County fire rescue paramedic who was coming now to supply his Franconia Company number 5 with more IVs and other supplies. As we said before, these guys have been running all morning long. They're trying to keep everything equipped, and they're trying to keep people moving along. As you can see, some people, this woman, just confused about what's going on. Maybe she's trying to get into the hospital. They're trying to keep everything clear because at any time, oftentimes with no warning at all, they've got people walking up, they have people being driven up into this area. To recap, we're at Arlington Hospital in Fairfax County, in Arlington, I'm sorry, and we have 28 people now who have been brought to this hospital, most of them, maybe all of them, we believe, from the Pentagon. That's the very latest. So actually we have tape also. We want to show you now how some of these people have arrived today. They have arrived by ambulance and by personal vehicle. We have seen as many as 3 people come out of the back of a private van, maybe a co-worker, somebody who brought them here to get assistance. Their injuries vary, really, but we're not hearing about critical, serious, and other indications of where they fall. We're just hearing that they've got cuts and bruises, they have burns, they have shortness of breath, they have possible broken bones, but no one is telling us about the severity of those victims. They're also telling us at this hour that they don't have any fatalities to speak of, but they would not let us know if that was likely to change. So I think they're really trying to get a handle on this situation. Again, a huge influx of people from the Pentagon, 28 in all, here in Arlington at Arlington Hospital. That's the very latest. Back to you at Broadcast House.
You don't have any word on their condition yet, do you, Jen?
I'm sorry, say one more time?
Don't have any word on their condition, do you?
No word on condition. I asked specifically how many critical, how many fatalities, and she said, I can't tell you about either one of those things. And I asked again, do you have any fatalities? And she said, I do not believe so. So, of course, now the next question is, what are you dealing with? Are you dealing with biological? And she said, we have no indication thus far. We want to show you Amy Crawford in the pink suit is coming out. Maybe she'll talk with us once again. Ms. Crawford, will you talk with us once again? She is the spokesperson here at Arlington. We're on live right now. We wanted to know if you could give us a quick update on the situation and what you're dealing with. And you are Catherine Hughes. What do we have, ladies?
Right now we have 26 people that have been brought here. They've all been brought from the Pentagon area. Our first victim came in at 10:35 a.m. We have a variety of medical issues, different severities, and we're just keeping up with the flow.
What about their status? Any criticals, any fatalities?
At this time, we don't have any fatalities, but there's a variety of different medical issues and different severity levels. Some have come in with cuts, burns, shortness of breath, and others are a little bit more severe.
Regarding the shortness of breath, any possibility that you may be dealing with biological weapons?
At this time, we do not know that.
We just saw a few moments ago masks and other garb being handed out to your folks. Why now and why so late?
At this time, I can't answer that for you. I'll let you know.
What about
accommodate right now?
Right now, we have the capacity to take more. We have called in all of our extra on-call surgeons and staff members. We have more people on the way, and we'll be taking those and handling those as we can.
Okay, Catherine Hughes here at Arlington Hospital. That's the very latest. 26 patients. We were corrected. Back to you at Broadcast House.
All right. And the D.C. National Guard is being called up. Joining us on the phone, Lieutenant Colonel Phyllis Phipps Barnes. Colonel, what's the situation?
Hi. We're asking that all members of the 372nd Military Police Battalion, to include all the subordinate companies, to please report to the Armory as soon as they are able to. Thank you.
All right, ma'am.
All right,
thank you very much.
We want to give you that number for blood supplies. It is 1-866 blood saves. That's 1-866 blood saves. We also received this from the American Red Cross. 80,000 blood donations in their blood inventory are ready to ship to affected areas and will ensure that patients' lives are saved. But again, right here in this area, if you'd like to donate blood, call 1-866 blood saves. Let's go back to Gary Rios. He's at National Airport.
And indeed, Andrea, here at Reagan National, they are in the highest state of alert, as they have been for the past few hours. Sirens have been constant throughout the day. As we reported a short while ago, there were a minimum of 2 military helicopters hovering over the landing area of National Airport. They are by no means ready to say that anything is over and done with. Much earlier in the morning, beginning around 9:30 to 10 o'clock, after the plane crash over at the Pentagon, the exodus, the evacuation of the airport terminal began. And as we arrived, we were able to talk with a couple of pilots, some who had just come in, others who were trying to get out of here. Let's go to that tape right now.
There was, it said New York Center was shut down, wouldn't accept any airplanes coming or going. Then we heard later on that a couple airplanes flew in the Trade Center. That's all we know.
Okay, have you heard about the one now into the Pentagon?
Well, we saw the smoke, so that was fairly obvious, yeah.
Have you heard anything as to where these aircraft came from?
Not a bit.
Apparently not national, or?
Yeah, I don't know.
Nothing unusual reported here at the airport?
No, we were busy getting our passengers back to the gate, so we haven't really paid attention to the news that much since we heard, and so I really don't have much more information than that.
How would you describe the mood of the staff people at the airport?
Well, fine, calm. They're exiting people, doing the proper thing. So everything's going pretty smooth considering the circumstances.
Pretty sad day.
Yeah, it is.
Could you tell me if you were just coming in or going out?
We were getting ready to go out, and they told us not to.
Just shut down everything?
Yeah.
Did they give you any explanation?
Only what you've heard already.
Did they indicate, have you heard among pilots, if any of these aircraft might have come out of National?
Then I have no idea, no comment on that. I don't know anything about it. Sorry.
Okay, and again, it's been clarified now that indeed none of the planes involved in any of the terrorist activities around here have originated from National Airport. With us now, Mike and Andrea, Jonathan Gaffney of the Metropolitan Area Airport Authority is what I'm trying to say. Jonathan, the airport's obviously closed and is going to remain closed at least for today.
Yeah, we're closed until tomorrow at 11. We'll kind of reassess the situation. Of course, the whole national system is down as well. The whole place has been evacuated, as you can see. We'll make a decision tomorrow morning, kind of what the next step is.
Now, we're sure that none of the airplane involved in any of these activities originated here at National.
Did not originate here from National. It's our understanding that 1, possibly 2, originated at Dulles.
And how did that happen?
Don't know. We just all knew, don't know how it happened.
Were there hijackings apparently after takeoff?
We don't know. A lot of need for information. Not a lot of information out there right now.
Okay. All aircraft are now accounted for, is that correct?
It's our understanding that they are, but then that's not, the FAA could probably better account for that. I know that all the planes that are supposed to be here at National are back at the gate. Everything's been evacuated, and we're kind of in a hold pattern until tomorrow.
Now, are there any unidentified aircraft in the air in our air region presently?
I don't know. Not that I'm aware of it, then I wouldn't know. I just would not know that.
And the alert that's in place here at National is just because of what's happened elsewhere.
Just a precaution, exactly. You know, early on, you know, anything could have been a target. We thought it was best to just go ahead and just pull every plane back to the gate, which we did, unload every plane, and evacuate the building. Right now, the terminals are void of anybody at all.
Commercial air traffic, indeed, I guess general aviation as well, is shut down nationwide for the rest of today?
Correct. I also understand that, and this is important for this region, a lot of the international arrivals we get at Dulles in the afternoon, it's my understanding, certainly won't land here. I heard on television that they'll all be going to somewhere in Canada. So if you're expecting someone arriving this evening on a flight from Europe, which is probably already taken off, they very well could end up somewhere in Canada or parts unknown right now. Patience is the watchword for today.
So that's a very important detail, obviously, for international travelers coming into the Washington area. They obviously can't arrive here today and will probably be taken to Canada.
That's what I heard on the television. I don't know for sure, but they will not be here.
Okay. And around the world, obviously there are so many international flights. International air traffic is still going on, as far as we know, in a normal mode?
So far as we know, but how it affects airports in the United States. Again, think of all the tens of thousands of people flying to the United States today. If it holds true, they may not arrive in the United States today. They may end up in other places. So when we talk about snowstorms, we talk about a regional effect. You talk about a national effect right now where everything is grounded.
Indeed, even with some global repercussions.
Sure.
Thank you. Jonathan Gaffney of the Airport Transit, the Airport Authority. Mike and Andrea, again, Washington National, all of the airports in the United States closed until 11 o'clock tomorrow morning at the latest. We understand that we've been cleared to go into the airport proper now to change our location, so perhaps we'll be back with you from there shortly.
All right, Gary Reels at Reagan National. Let's bring you up to date on this incredible, tragic day. Let me start with a quote from Senator Chuck Hagel of Nebraska. The Senate
won a medical conference that happened to be down the street in Manhattan. Surgeons from all over the country that happened to be here in New York City, they've gone to the hotel, put them on a bus, and they've just brought them into this area, and they're going to be assisting in this triage unit that they're hoping to set up. We're still not sure that they've actually been able to set it up, but to be perfectly honest with you, Chris, it appears to us, looking at it here firsthand, trying to figure out.
See ambulances go by, many of them from Walter Reed Military Hospital on the other side of Washington, clearly going in there to help with whatever casualties there are. We also have seen a couple of times F-16s, at least one F-16 flying overhead a couple of times. That was reported as to be the case of the Pentagon scrambling fighter jets in case another plane was heading this way. But as I said, right now there has been no evidence of another plane coming this way. They're on full alert, of course, and trying to now recover from the severe damage that hit the other side of the building. Judy?
All right, Bob Franken, I just want to remind our viewers that the section of the Pentagon that was hit was between the 4th, 5th, and 6th corridors. This confirmed apparently a little earlier today by Wesley Clark, General Clark, a former NATO chief. He said from what he could tell, it appears this was the Army section of the Pentagon, planning and logistics area where certainly Army leaders would have been working in their offices. I want to read for you now a statement from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, quoting, "We are outraged at this cowardly attack on the people of the United States. Our heartfelt prayers are with the victims and their families, and we stand strongly united behind the President as our Commander-in-Chief." And I want to clarify that this is a statement by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I want to clarify that this is from the leadership of the Congress. I misunderstood when I was handed this just a moment ago. And continuing, congressional leaders, we will work with the President to ensure that the full resources of the United States government are brought to bear to protect the American people and to punish the perpetrators of these unconscionable acts. May God bless America. And just quickly, before I go back to Aaron Brown in New York, hospitals in Washington dealing with the casualties from the Pentagon Washington Hospital Center, 29 patients, a blood shortage, we are being told, in Washington. So any of you who are able to get to a hospital anywhere in the Washington area, it is very possible that there is a need for blood to be donated. So we will just put that information out there as well. Aaron, now back to you in New York.
Judy, thanks. We now are being told that Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, has been evacuated. Again, this is another one of those multi-terminal airports. It's an enormous airport, and that is being evacuated. At least one of the flights, and perhaps two if memory serves me, that has gone down today was headed towards Los Angeles, one towards San Francisco. We also have a report that Disney World in Orlando has been evacuated. Someone said to me a moment ago, before the day is over, everything's going to be shut down. And that seems to be where we're headed. CNN's Richard Roth is on the streets of New York, and he can join us now. Richard, what can you tell us?
Aaron, New Yorkers think they've seen everything, but they'll say they're amazed at what has happened, stunned. Right now behind me, what normally would be the World Trade Center is no more, a huge cloud of white smoke. And right now it's like a war zone. Thousands of New Yorkers streaming north. The mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, has told everyone to get north of Canal Street. We're several miles north of it. Right now, New Yorkers are trying to get out of Manhattan. There's a ferry on the west side going to New Jersey. It's really the only access out. The mayor advising that people should take the subways. We have seen dozens of emergency vehicles, hundreds. Firemen being bussed in, decontamination vans coming in, call for blood donations. New Yorkers, their faces, their expressions, stunned, amazed right now. With us, several of those people who witnessed some of the carnage today. Tell us what you saw when you exited the subway station due to a lack of smoke. Eileen.
It was very smoky, and then we exited on Church Street out of the PATH train station. I crossed over to Church and Fulton, and I was trying to get a cell phone. I was trying to get up the block, and I turned around and saw this tremendous fire. I actually thought it was a bomb. I couldn't see a plane, and I saw people jumping off the building. Many people just jumping. And in a panic, I had my bag and my cell phone and everything, and I was trying to find a phone because the cell phone wasn't working. Everybody was screaming. Everybody was running. The cops were trying to maintain the calm. And in that haste, people were stampeding. People started screaming that there was another plane coming. I didn't see the plane, but I turned around, and the second building just exploded. And again, all the debris was flying towards us. There was a woman on the ground with her baby. People were stampeding the baby. Myself and another man threw ourselves over the baby and pushed into the building. I got up and I just ran. I ran towards City Hall, and I said, oh God, why am I running there? And then I started to run towards the water. And then I was by probably Spring Street Prince Street. I was at a payphone, and I heard the rumbling. I thought it was another bomb. I thought it was another building close to me. And then I just ran from the payphone. The man is grabbing me back, telling me to stay here, you're safe. I was like, no way, I'm getting out of here, go north. And then I ran into a shoe store because I wanted to call my husband. That's all I wanted to do was let him know I was alive because he knew I was in the World Trade. And I got my office, and they connected me to my husband, and then we heard the second fall of the World Trade Center. And I'm astonished by the bombing. I just want to make a statement that these New York policemen and firemen, God bless them, they kept us calm. They tried so hard to keep us moving north, and it was just absolute horror. It was horror.
And when you look back there at what would be the World Trade Center?
It's devastating. I can't even look back. My 6-year-old just last week asked my husband and I to take him to the observation deck, and it's gone. And you know what? Americans will persevere, and I don't think that we'll stoop to the level of these zealot terrorist pigs. And we won't kill children, I hope, and mothers. But you know what? Whatever we have to do to eradicate the country or the world of this vermin, I just hope Bush will do whatever is necessary to get rid of them. And I don't know what the route or what the answer is.
All right, thank you very much. A lot of other New Yorkers here continuing the evacuation from Lower Manhattan. Back to you, Aaron.
Thank you, Richard, very much. We told you a bit ago that the border, the U.S.-Mexican border, was at a high state of alert, had been essentially closed down, shut down. We're now told that the U.S.-Canada border is also in a high state of alert. So essentially what officials are trying to do is seal off the country. So if anyone is either trying to get in or get out, it's going to be a whole lot harder to do that. But what is possible and what is imaginable, I guess, changes some on a day like this. Jerry Howers, the former head of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency here in New York, and he joins us. As you look out, what do you see?
Well, this is absolutely devastating. An incident like this will tax every bit of resource in New York City, particularly since so many of the police officers and firefighters on the scene were injured.
Let me stop you for a second. I want to talk specifically about what you suspect is happening, but I want to go to LA first. Frank Buckley is in Los Angeles with us. Frank, what can you tell us about what's going on there?
Aaron, we just saw what appeared to be the worst possible situation. The last thing that we want to show you, in fact, people arriving here at the airport apparently friends or family members of some of the victims of at least one of the flights. 3 flights were bound for Los Angeles, and they are not arriving here, obviously. Now friends and family are beginning to trickle in. We haven't seen any until this moment, 2 people just arriving here at the airport. We can tell you that just within the last 15 minutes also, this terminal they have begun a process of evacuating this terminal, and in fact all of Los Angeles airport is being evacuated now, we are told, by airport police, who we just spoke to just a few minutes ago. I'd like to let you hear from Lieutenant Howard Whitehead of the Los Angeles Airport Police as to the status here at LAX.
Because we're working with other agencies who are conducting closures outside of the airport, I can't get information right now.
3 flights were bound for Los Angeles that appear to have been involved today. What accommodations are being made for the friends and family of passengers?
That's being handled by the airlines. They're having a meeting now concerning that, so that information has to get from the airlines.
So officially, what are you starting at this point?
We're starting a total evacuation of the airport.
Will that include both workers and passengers?
Only key employees will remain at the airport.
This is the entire airport that will be evacuated?
Yes, ma'am.
Why
the
evacuation?
Because the evacuation has been ordered. I can't tell you why, but that's how it stands now.
Is there a security threat to the airport?
It's precautionary at this point.
Have you ever seen anything like this before in Los Angeles?
Not to my knowledge, no.
And what is going to be your role, the police department's role in this? What are you doing?
We're protecting the public. That's what our job is.
Will roads in and out of the airport be closed as well? Will people be able to get into the airport?
Right now, this thing is fluid. We're working as we go with the changes, so I couldn't give you a definite on anything right now.
How many police officers more or less
Thanks very much.
here in the airport on a regular day?
Other agencies involved, I couldn't give you an exact figure.
Right now, there are other agencies?
Yes, ma'am. That's all I have for right now. Thank you. My name is Lieutenant Whitehead.
So this is what you're looking
That was Lieutenant Howard Whitehead of the LAX Police telling us again that just within the last 15 or 20 minutes an order has come down, a command decision to evacuate the terminals at LAX. Up until this point, of course, flights were not being allowed in or out. Now they are evacuating all the terminals except for key personnel. Also here with me now is Lieutenant Colonel Al Van Cleef of the Salvation Army. You have the very difficult task of helping to coordinate the grief counseling. Can you tell me about the accommodations that are being made for family members of Flight 11, 77, and 175?
We have 6 grief counselors on site now, 2 of the teams ready. We're waiting word now from American Airlines. They are diligently working on the plans as far as a private location where the family will be received. As soon as we're aware of that, then they will make contact with us so our counselors can proceed to where family members will be arriving. We've done the same thing here in Los Angeles as well as San Francisco and Washington, D.C.
Very difficult day for you, sir. Thanks very much for joining us. That is the latest from Los Angeles. Aaron, back to you.
Frank, thank you. Frank Buckley in Los Angeles. We are in the midst of an extraordinary national tragedy, attacks in Washington and New York, attacks on airliners, the dimensions of which are not yet clear, but what is clear is that this is a day unlike any other. The worst fears of officials around the country, security, intelligence, military officials, political leaders, worst fears being realized, being played out in New York and Washington, 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh where a plane went down. Other planes have crashed. We don't know the circumstances precisely. We now have a report perhaps of another building here in New York that has collapsed. CNN producer Rose Arce is on the phone. Rose, what can you tell us?
Yes, there's another building very close to the World Trade Center that was hit by debris some time ago, and it appears to be on the verge of collapse. Also, that enormous plume of smoke that you see that's surrounding the building, there are suspicions that it's not all smoke, but that there's a gas leak within that smoke. And that has caused a tremendous amount of panic in this area. The police have been saying that they're now evacuating all of lower Manhattan, and you can see people moving north in a flood through these streets that are just filled with ash. You know, as you walk through the ash, you can see debris from inside the World Trade Center itself, a very, very eerie scene, pieces of paper from people's desks, office supplies, many, many blocks from the site of the actual explosion, where they now are fearing that there may be yet another explosion because of this potential gas leak.
Rose, thank you. Rose Arce, who's on the streets of Manhattan. Back to Jerry Hauer, who who ran the mayor's emergency response team, and I'm not sure I got the title right, but the essence is correct. When you all, after the '93 attack on the buildings, and you sat down and tried to redo a plan, which I assume happened, did you anticipate anything of this magnitude?
Well, we have plans in place in New York City for massive incidents, but an incident like this is very difficult to plan for, just because of the number of people that have been, the number of responders that have been injured. There are
the responders, we mean police,
fire, EMS,
rescue, correct.
Right. There are literally hundreds of people coming from New Jersey. As you heard from the governor earlier, the National Guard will be activated to help with law enforcement to help seal the area. I know that FEMA will be activating their search and rescue teams to assist with going through the debris. This is going to be a long-term operation. It is going to be a very difficult one because, as you heard earlier, there's still a gas leak in the building, which is fueling this fire. And until the gas is turned off, that fire could burn for some time.
Stay with us, Jerry. Back to Washington, CNN's Judy Woodruff. Judy, you have more here. What can you tell us?
Well, Aaron, we are monitoring, of course, statements from around the globe, and we've just, in the last few minutes, been able to get a statement from the Taliban ambassador to Pakistan. The Taliban, of course, being the religious organization that is the party controlling the government in Afghanistan. The name Mullah Abdul Salam Zaif said in reaction to the news of these terror attacks in the United States, and I am quoting, "We want to tell the American children that Afghanistan feels your pain, and we hope that the courts find justice." Now, this statement, again, made by a Taliban ambassador to Pakistan, his name, Mullah Abdul Salam Zaif, he made it at a news conference in Islamabad. And I would just add that we're told that at the top of the hour, which would be perhaps 1 o'clock Eastern time, we're expecting a news conference live from Kabul, Afghanistan. That is the capital of Afghanistan, the Taliban being the controlling religious party in that country, Afghanistan being the country where we have every reason to believe Osama bin Laden, the leader of a huge terrorist network, continues to live in hiding. The Taliban has denied his presence there from time to time, but it is believed by those who follow the activities of his organization that he is in Afghanistan. So we will, of course, be watching that. Let me just... All right, Aaron, I want to go back to you now in New York.
Thank you, Judy. We have on the phone with us New York's Mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Mayor, give us your best piece of information as the situation right now.
The situation right now is a massive rescue effort that's going on right now. We're trying to evacuate thousands and thousands of people. We have as many of our police and fire personnel as we have down in the southern part of Manhattan, evacuating people, trying to save as many lives as possible. We've been in communication with Governor Pataki, who's gotten the National Guard ready, and they're going to come in and relieve us a little bit later in the day. And we've spoken to the White House, and the urban search and rescue teams will come here also to assist us. But right now, it's the New York City Police and Fire, EMS, that are down there trying to evacuate as many people as we possibly can. And we've asked everyone to leave Lower Manhattan if they can on their own so that it relieves our efforts. And this will be going on all day. It's a horrible, horrible tragedy.
It is that. Mr. Mayor, can you tell me, is it are people panicking down there, or
no,
are they
people,
leaving?
I was there in a building that got hit by the debris when the first tower collapsed. So I had to evacuate with people, and we were trapped in the building for a while. And we finally were able to get out. and we all walked north, and people, everything that I observed, even though it was hundreds, maybe in some cases thousands of people that were walking down the street, they were orderly, they were calm, they handled themselves really probably better than anybody had any right to expect.
And Mr. Mayor, we were told one of the problems, and Lord knows there are hundreds of problems, one of the problems was that a large number of police, fire, EMS personnel have also been injured in this. Can you shed any light on that?
I don't even want to contemplate what the number will be. But when the building collapsed, we had a lot of our police officers and firefighters in the building. And I know many of them because I saw some of them go in because I was there, and I'm praying for them. I just hope they're able to get out.
I think we all
the losses to our police department and fire department,
Sir,
are going to be severe.
Do you believe that was there another set of explosions that caused the buildings to collapse, or was it the structural damage caused by the planes?
I don't know. I saw the first collapse and heard the second because I was in a building when the second took place. I think it was structural, but I cannot be sure.
And can you tell us how many hospitals in the city and perhaps outside the city too? All of them.
Right now, at last count, we were utilizing over 50. I think it'll be over 100 by the, and that was as of a half hour ago. And we're utilizing all of the hospitals in New York City. We're utilizing the hospitals in Westchester and Rockland, Nassau County, northern New Jersey. And the main thing we have to urge people to do is to be calm and evacuate Lower Manhattan. And as far as the rest of the city is concerned, just to go about their lives as best as possible. I never thought I would see something like this happen. I got there after the first plane hit and before the second, and watching people jump from the top of the World Trade Center is an unbelievable sight.
Mr. Mayor, my colleague Jeff Greenfield is with us also. Jeff?
Mr. Mayor, in terms of, you've already said that you want Lower Manhattan evacuated, you want everybody else to go about their business. Are there specific instructions that you want to communicate right now to police, fire, everybody else?
Well, police and fire are there, and they're there in large numbers, and they are, first of all, trying to get into the rubble and the debris to save as many people as possible. We also have thousands of police officers in Lower Manhattan, and what we want people to do is to leave Lower Manhattan if they can on their own. Just to walk. I just talked to Dick Grasso, who runs the stock exchange, and we have a lot of police there. They have 3,000 people there. We're going to walk them out. We're walking them east and then north, which is essentially the way I walked out. I was right below the World Trade Center when it collapsed, and then we walked up to Greenwich Village. People should walk out of Lower Manhattan, get above Canal Street, for safety reasons, but for a second reason. We need people out of there so we can get thousands of ambulances in and out over the course of the next couple hours. And the fewer people we have there, the more lives we're going to be able to save.
Mr. Mayor, are the subways operating?
The subways are operating outside of Manhattan.
Outside
of Manhattan, the subways are operating. A couple of delays here and there, but in all other four boroughs, the subways are operating. In Manhattan, there are significant delays. We thought we had the Lexington Avenue open, but it is not. I'm just checking right now. The Lexington Avenue is not open. The A train is working, and people will just have to test and see. The best thing to do right now is to walk. The safest and best thing to do is to walk to your destination. Where schools have remained open, and we've worked with the chancellor to try to make certain that the schools will remain open for as long as they have to help parents with the kids that would be coming home, starting at around 1 or 2 o'clock.
Mr. Mayor, as you know better than anyone, and certainly New Yorkers know, but people around the country perhaps do not, this was Election Day here. What is the status of the election?
We canceled it. The governor and I decided about an hour and a half ago that it made no sense to have an election today. We needed all those police officers who were at the election site, and we need to focus on rescue. So we'll find another day. We'll find another day for the election. The governor and I made that decision about an hour and a half ago.
Mr. Mayor, you're a very focused guy in moments like this. Is it hard, given the magnitude of what's happened here and around the country, to focus on what you have to do and not just be angry?
It's very hard, and it's very hard because I know some of the people that are there. They're personal friends and close friends who are in the building, and I haven't been able to find out if they're safe yet.
Your emergency command center, what some people have called a bunker, was located, was it not, in one of the World Trade Center buildings?
It was located close enough to it so that it was affected by it. It's not in one of the buildings, but it was located right in that area, as is City Hall, the police department, and all of them had to be evacuated. So that area of Manhattan, once I was in a building at the time that we were using as a command center, and we were trapped in the building for a while, for about 20 minutes, not able to get out different exits that were overcome with smoke and debris.
Mr. Mayor, just as a practical question, do hospitals need help? Do they need
hospitals need all of the help they can get. We're getting a great deal of help from the surrounding areas. The governor has mobilized the state in order to make hospitals available to us outside of Manhattan. Any hospital personnel or emergency personnel that want to come in and volunteer, that'd be enormously helpful. But the best thing for us to do right now, we're trying to coordinate, is to move people out of the city to hospitals in surrounding areas, which we're actually doing now. But so far, though, our hospital system is we're very fortunate to have a gigantic hospital system.
CNN.
Do they have enough blood? Do they need blood? Do they need people to come in and help them out?
I'm sure they will. We're getting the National Guard to relieve our people by early to late this afternoon. They're being mobilized now. And 3 urban search and rescue teams are going to come to New York City to help us. And then anyone that wants to volunteer from surrounding areas, volunteer fire departments and others, we're working with them now to do that, to try to relieve our fire department.
It's a horrific day, Mr. Mayor.
There's no possible way to begin to describe it.
No, there is not.
To see what happened there is, of course, it makes you very, very angry. It's almost impossible to describe the level of anger that you have that somebody or someone would do something like this. And all of the good and wonderful people that were affected by this. There's no reason for this. There's no excuse for this. And there's something like this is just something you never thought you would live to see.
I couldn't agree more, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
New York's Mayor Rudy Giuliani on what was to be an election day. The mayor not up for re-election because of term limits, but the election has been postponed. Jeff, I just step back for a second.
Well, that's
you talk about anger, and we stand up here and we look at this, and we've all listened to what's been going on now as we've been on the air for 3 hours or so. And there was a woman that Richard Roth interviewed about a half hour ago who said what I suspect most Americans are feeling right now, and some would like to say and can't, how angry she was, how cowardly this all seemed to her. Quickly, we go back to Washington and Judy Woodruff. Judy?
Aaron, government sources telling CNN that President Bush, who had been in Florida for a 2-day trip and who broke that trip off this morning to head back to Washington, will now not return to Washington. Repeating, President Bush will not return to Washington. We do not know where the president will land or whether where his aircraft will go, Air Force One, but we just are passing along this information just as soon as we have it. Again, as we were talking to former NATO head Wesley Clark, General Wesley Clark, a little while ago, he pointed out that there are contingency plans that the military and the security people have for the president in a situation like this, and we're not going to do any speculating right here about where the president might be going. Joining us now on the telephone, there is some information we want to share with you about aircraft in the sky that is, we're told, is safe right now. We're told by the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, they're telling us 50 aircraft are safely in the sky right now, all within about 50 miles of their destination. But in the meantime, we want to talk to Utah Republican Senator Orrin Hatch, who's joining us on the telephones. Senator Hatch, are you there?
Yes, I am.
And I know my colleague Wolf Blitzer, who's here with me in the studio in Washington, had also talked with you. Senator, you've been briefed by what authorities?
Well, I'm on both the Judiciary Committee and also the Intelligence Committee, and I've been briefed by the highest levels of the FBI and of the intelligence community. And I just have to say our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims of this terrible tragedy caused by a bunch of cowards. And there's no justification for what these cowards have done to purely innocent Americans, but I do have some information.
Senator Hatch, this is Wolf Blitzer. Tell us, I spoke with you earlier on the telephone, but tell us precisely what you are now being told in these high-level briefings about those who may, and repeat the word may, have been responsible for these attacks.
You're right. They've come to the conclusion that this looks like the signature of Osama bin Laden and that he may be the one behind this. I think most authorities agree that this is something that we doubt seriously if Iran, Iraq, or Libya would try and do, because they know of the massive response that we'd have to bring down on them. But there was no advance notice at all. They had no way of knowing that this was going to happen. It was carefully planned. And what it means is it seems to me that if that turns out to be true, we're going to have to revitalize Shah Massoud and the other people in Afghanistan who basically are fighting to get rid of this type of terrorism. And I think we're going to have to ask our friends in Pakistan to get, in turn, to be more cooperative than they have in the past. And then we'd have to work with our allies to have an international strategy to combat this type of international jihad against the West.
We're listening to Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah. We also have joining us on the telephone Senator John McCain from his home in Arizona. Senator McCain, I assume you've been talking to authorities as well.
Yes, Judy, and I'm on Capitol Hill in Washington.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yes. The situation is so serious that words don't describe it. I think that it's clear that the organization and magnitude of the attacks required more than a few people to perpetrate it, and it'll take some time to determine who they are and who supported these attacks, but I think we'll find them out, and they will suffer the full measure of our justice. This is obviously an act of war that's been committed on the United States of America.
What do you mean, obviously, an act of war, Senator McCain?
These attacks clearly constitute an act of war. The unwarranted, unprovoked attacks against innocent American citizens is clearly an act of war, and one that requires that kind of national response and international response.
Senator Orrin Hatch, I believe, is also still with us, Senator. And Senator Hatch, you mentioned the bin Laden organization. Former NATO head General Wesley Clark also said to us about an hour ago in an interview that he believes that it's only the bin Laden organization that is capable of carrying out attacks this coordinated and on this massive a scale. What are you basing your information on?
Well, keep in mind, there are nations that also could carry out these attacks, but I don't think would dare do that, knowing that their signature is going to be figured out. We're going to find out who did this, and we're going after the bastards. It's that simple. And I just have to say that both the FBI and our intelligence community believe that this is a bin Laden signature. And I believe it is. I was the first to point out bin Laden to the Clinton administration and said they're going to kill Americans, and we've got to get on top of that. And I think we're going to have to get on top of it, because this is a cowardly bunch who will stop at nothing to, like you say, have a jihad or a war against the United States, and to do it in the most cowardly fashion.
But Senator McCain, I mean, there will be those who are saying the United States was taking all reasonable precautions. We had security at airports, metal detectors, and so forth and so on. How much more is going to have to be done to prevent something like these things from happening again?
Judy, I don't think our lifestyles will be the same for a long time, since it was before these attacks, as far as use of transportation, particularly airports, are concerned. There have been warnings about whether our security was good enough and whether the proper measures were being taken. I'm sure that'll all be reviewed. By the way, I have no information as to who caused this, and I hesitate to speculate, but I am confident that the President of the United States will lead us, and we will find out who has carried out these acts. And I think it's a little premature to make that determination until we have the hard facts, but I'm sure that we'll get them. The other aspect of this is that it may highlight over time the need for more human intelligence. We have very good technical intelligence capabilities, satellites, etc., but for many years we haven't had the kind of human intelligence which determines motivations before actions are taken.
I'm going to interrupt you, Senator McCain. These are the first pictures we have in. This is from Somerset County, Pennsylvania. This is where the United Airlines flight, I believe it is 176, went down. I'm sorry, I'm correcting. United Airlines 93. This was a Boeing 757 bound from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. It crashed in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, near the town of Shanksville, south of Pittsburgh. We're told about 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh in western Pennsylvania. It is not known how many passengers or crew were on board, although initial reports indicated no survivors. Again, these are the first pictures we have coming in from WTAJ there in the Pittsburgh area. United Airlines telling us earlier they had lost this flight, and they knew that it had crashed near Pittsburgh. There is a second United Airlines flight, the Boeing 767 Flight 175, bound from Boston to Los Angeles, has crashed. The airline's still telling us at this point that they do not know where. We don't have information on the number of people aboard. It is possible, but not confirmed, that this would have been the second plane to hit the World Trade Center. Now again, 2 United Airlines flights, and in addition to American Airlines flights, the Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles, this was a Boeing 767 with 81 passengers on board, 9 crew members, 2 pilots. This is believed to be one of the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center. All 4 of these planes that we're describing to you now, these flights, all headed to California. The second American Airlines Flight 77, this is a Boeing 757, left Dulles Airport near Washington on its way to Los Angeles. It had 58 passengers on board, 4 crew, 2 pilots. This plane unaccounted for. However, a commercial jet was seen crashing into the Pentagon a few hours ago, and it is believed that this could have been the one, but again, not confirmed. So 2 commercial airliners, American Airlines, 2 United Airlines. And I would just add at this point, because to be reassuring to some extent to those of you who are watching, we've been reporting that all flights within the United States have been canceled. There's been a complete hold down on all commercial travel. However, there were planes that were already in the air when these terrible incidents took place this morning. And as of a few moments ago, the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, was reporting that there were still 50 aircraft in the skies. Now, some of those may have landed in the last few minutes, but that was the information as of a few minutes ago. All of them were said to be within 50 or so miles of their destination. Now, I'm getting new information in my ear. Now, reporting our congressional correspondent Kate Snow, you're looking at a picture of the Pentagon Live. There's still smoke billowing out of our military command center in the United States. As we look at these pictures, I'm going to turn it over right now to our